Infertile CEO forced his wife to sleep with another man for a baby, but after she got pregnant, he divorced her. Hello, my treasured, beautiful, and forever faithful family. How are you today, my soul companions? Your presence in my life is a blessing I never take for granted. You are my peace, my courage, my reason to keep creating with love. Every word I speak carries your name in my heart. We're more than a community. We are a circle of endless love. Now receive this special prayer I speak with all my heart. Dear God of endless grace, let your light flow through my beloved family like morning sun through the trees. Ease their burdens, soothe their hearts, and refresh their spirits. May they feel joy in the quiet, strength in the struggle, and hope in every step. Surround them with love that never fades and peace that never leaves. Amen. If this message hugged your heart, let your light shine. Like, comment, and share. Because this family is built on love that cannot be broken. Write it proudly. I am with my brother. Together we walk in love, we rise in grace, and we move forward, hand in hand. The first time Amanda Baldwin saw Mike Topping across the crowded charity gala, something inside her knew. There was an electricity in the air that made the fine hairs on her arms stand at attention, a silent recognition that transcended the champagne flutes and polite conversation floating around them. Amanda, with her rich, dark skin and eyes that held warmth like summer sunshine, stood out effortlessly among the sea of Manhattan's elite. "Who is that?" her friend Melissa whispered, following Amanda's gaze. "Mike Topping," Amanda replied, the name feeling strangely familiar on her tongue, despite never having spoken it before. CEO of Topping Enterprises. They're revolutionizing sustainable technology. What Amanda didn't say was how she'd read every article about his rise from a working class background to becoming one of the youngest CEOs to make the Forbes list. She didn't mention how his speeches about creating generational wealth and opportunity had inspired her own community outreach programs at the kindergarten where she taught. When their eyes met across the room, the rest of the gala seemed to blur into insignificance. His confident stride toward her held purpose, and when he extended his hand, Amanda felt a jolt of connection that made her breath catch. "Mike Topping," he introduced himself, his voice deep and resonant in a way that news clips hadn't captured. "And you must be the woman everyone's been trying to introduce me to all night." Amanda's laugh came easily. "Amanda Baldwin. And here I thought I was flying under the radar." "Not possible," he said, his gaze appreciative but respectful. "Not when you light up the entire room." That night marked the beginning of what Amanda would later call her fairy tale. Their courtship was as passionate as it was thoughtful. Mike sending handwritten notes after each date, Amanda introducing him to soul food Sunday dinners with her family in Harlem. He listened when she spoke about her dreams of expanding access to early childhood education in underserved communities. She challenged him to ensure his company's innovations reached those same neighborhoods. 3 months later, on a rooftop garden overlooking Central Park, Mike knelt before her with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "You make me believe in things I'd given up on," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Love, legacy, purpose beyond profit. Marry me, Amanda. Let me spend my life showing you what you mean to me." Their wedding, 6 months later, was a celebration that blended their worlds seamlessly. Amanda's kindergarten students released butterflies after their vows. Mike's business associates marveled at the authentic joy that permeated every moment. When they danced their first dance to Sam Cooke's "Nothing Can Change This Love," Mike held her like she was the most precious thing in his universe. "I will never let anything come between us," he whispered against her temple. "You are my heart. Walking outside my body, Amanda Topping." The first 3 years of their marriage unfolded like the most beautiful chapters of a beloved book. They traveled, Paris in spring, where they made love with the windows open to catch the scent of rain on ancient streets. Ghana, where Mike surprised her with a ceremony to honor her ancestors, and quiet weekends at a lake house he purchased. For anniversaries and future family gatherings, in their penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, they created rituals that anchored their busy lives. Sunday mornings meant breakfast in bed, reading the newspaper aloud to each other between kisses that tasted of coffee and possibility. Wednesday nights were sacred. No work calls, just dinner prepared together while dancing barefoot in their kitchen to Amanda's father's old vinyl records. "Tell me a secret," Mike would often ask as they lay tangled in sheets, her head resting on his chest. "I knew I would marry you the moment you spoke about your mother at that gala," she confessed. "Once, the way you said she taught you that true wealth was measured in how much you gave, not what you kept." "My secret," he'd responded, fingers tracing the curve of her spine, "is that I rehearsed that story, knowing you might be there. I'd seen you months before, volunteering at a literacy event. I needed to meet the woman who read to children with such love they forgot to be shy." On their third anniversary, as moonlight painted silver patterns across their bedroom, Amanda curled against Mike's side and voiced the dream they'd been circling. "I think it's time," she whispered, heart fluttering with anticipation. "I'm ready for us to start trying for a baby." Mike's face transformed with such pure joy that Amanda felt tears spring to her eyes. He gathered her close, pressing reverent kisses to her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "A little girl with your smile," he murmured, "or a boy with your kind heart. Nothing would make me happier than creating a family with you, Amanda." That night, their lovemaking took on a new dimension, tender yet filled with purpose. Each touch, invested with dreams of the future they would build together. Amanda fell asleep in Mike's arms, her heart so full it felt like it might overflow. The first negative pregnancy test came as a disappointment, but not a concern. Amanda's mother had always told her these things took time, patience, faith. Mike bought her flowers that day, tucked a note in her lunchbox, reminding her that the journey was part of their story too. The second month passed in similar fashion, and the third. By the sixth month, Amanda found herself studying fertility, charts and tracking cycles, with increasing attention to detail. Mike supported her fully, adjusting his schedule to be present during her optimal windows, bringing home books on conception, creating a special tea blend meant to support reproductive health. "It will happen when it's meant to," he assured her, though Amanda noticed the slightest furrow of worry beginning to appear between his brows. After a year of trying, they scheduled their first appointment with a fertility specialist. Dr. Patel ran comprehensive tests on both of them, her manner compassionate yet matter-of-fact. "These things can take time," she said, echoing what they'd been telling themselves. "Let's gather information and create the best plan for your family." The night before they were due to receive their results, Amanda found Mike standing on their terrace, staring out at the glittering cityscape. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "Whatever we learn tomorrow," she said softly, "we face it together." He turned in her embrace, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her heart ache. "What if I can't give you the family you deserve, Mike?" Amanda cupped his face in her hands. "You are my family. Whatever comes next, we'll navigate it together. There are many ways to become parents if that's what's meant for us." The next morning, sitting in Dr. Patel's office, hands clasped tightly together, they received the news that would begin to reshape their future. Mike's sperm count and motility were significantly below average, making natural conception highly unlikely. Amanda felt him stiffen beside her, felt the almost imperceptible withdrawal, even as he maintained his composed exterior. On the ride home, she reached for his hand across the console of their luxury SUV, but his fingers remained rigid beneath hers. That evening, Amanda found him in their home office, staring unseeing at his computer screen. When she knelt before him, she saw the tracks of tears he'd tried to hide. "I've failed you," he whispered, voice raw. Amanda shook her head fiercely, taking his hands. "No, Mike, this isn't failure. This is just information that helps us decide what path to take." "You could have married anyone," he said, the insecurity so foreign in his usually confident demeanor. "Someone who could have given you children, easily." "I didn't marry anyone," Amanda replied, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "I married you, the man who sees me completely, the man who dances with me on Wednesday nights and reads the Sunday paper with me and makes me feel like the most treasured woman in the world." She rose to sit in his lap, cradling his face against her heart. "I love you, Mike Topping, not the children we might have, you. And together, we'll find our way forward." As he held her close, Amanda felt his tears dampen her blouse, unaware that beneath his gratitude, seeds of insecurity were taking root. Seeds that would, in time, grow into something neither of them could have imagined on that moonlit night when they first dreamed of creating a family together. Chapter 2: The Weight of Waiting. 5 years into their marriage, Amanda stood at the bathroom sink, staring at yet another negative pregnancy test. The small plastic window glared back at her, a single line where she desperately wished to see 2. With trembling hands, she placed it alongside the other tests from this cycle. 4 in total, each one purchased from a different pharmacy, as if the brand might somehow change the result. "Please," she whispered to no one, her voice breaking on the single syllable. "Please." Outside the master bathroom, Mike hovered in the hallway, his hand raised to knock, but frozen in indecision. He'd watched Amanda slip into the bathroom 30 minutes ago, had seen the hope in her eyes, despite her attempts to manage expectations. Now, hearing the soft sob that escaped through the door, he felt the familiar wave of inadequacy wash over him. He leaned his forehead against the cool wood, closing his eyes. "Amanda?" he called gently. "Baby, can I come in?" Inside, Amanda hastily wiped her tears, gathering the pregnancy tests and dropping them into the drawer where she kept them all. A peculiar archive of disappointment that she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Each one represented a cycle of hope and heartbreak, a monthly reminder of what her body couldn't seem to do. "Just a minute," she called back, splashing cold water on her face. When she opened the door, Mike took in her reddened eyes and the forced smile. Without a word, he gathered her in his arms, holding her as another wave of tears broke free. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry." Amanda pulled back slightly, her hand coming up to touch his face. "Don't apologize. This isn't your fault." But it was. The specialists had been clear. Mike's condition was the primary obstacle. After 2 years of trying naturally, they had begun fertility treatments, first intrauterine insemination, then progressing to in vitro fertilization. Each procedure had been accompanied by a surge of hope that dissipated with each failure. "I've scheduled another consultation with Dr. Rivera next week," Mike said, leading Amanda to their bed and sitting beside her. "There's a new protocol he wants to discuss." Amanda nodded, though the spark that had once accompanied these appointments had dimmed. They had spent over $200,000 on treatments already, and each cycle took a greater toll on her body, the hormone injections leaving her bloated and emotional, the egg retrievals painful, the anticipation excruciating. "Maybe we should take a break," she suggested quietly, staring down at their intertwined fingers. "Just for a few months, give my body time to reset." Mike stiffened beside her. "A break means giving up." "It means breathing, Mike. It means remembering that we're more than this." "Struggle." His jaw tightened, and Amanda recognized the look that had become increasingly common. determination hardening into something close to obsession. "One more try," he insisted. "Dr. Rivera thinks if we adjust your protocol and try a different sperm extraction technique for me, our chances improve significantly." Amanda looked into her husband's eyes and saw the desperation there, the need to solve this problem like he solved everything else in his life, with determination, resources, and sheer force of will. She knew what agreeing meant. More injections, more appointments, more roller coasters of hope and despair, but she also saw something fragile in Mike's expression, a vulnerability that made it impossible to refuse him. "Okay," she conceded softly. "One more try." Later that night, after Mike had fallen asleep, Amanda slipped out of bed and padded quietly to the spare bedroom they had long ago designated as the future nursery. Though it remained unfurnished, a single dresser stood against the wall. Opening the bottom drawer, Amanda removed a small wooden box, carrying it to the window seat where moonlight spilled across the floor. Inside were the tiny treasures she had collected over the years. A pair of minuscule hand-knitted booties purchased during their trip to Scotland, a silver rattle that had belonged to Mike as a baby, a collection of children's books with inscriptions written in her neat handwriting, "For our future little one, with all our love." And nestled among these items, a growing collection of baby socks, some patterned with animals, others in soft pastel colors. Whenever the weight of waiting became too much, Amanda would buy a single pair, a tangible expression of the hope she refused to relinquish completely. She lifted a pair of yellow socks to her cheek, the cotton soft against her skin. "I'm still waiting for you," she whispered. "Wherever you are, however you come to us, I'm still waiting." The following month brought a new treatment cycle, and with it, the familiar routine of appointments and injections. Amanda stood before the bathroom mirror, syringe in hand, staring at the bruises that mottled her abdomen, purple and yellow constellations mapping her journey. "Let me," Mike said, appearing in the doorway. He took the syringe from her hand, the guilt evident in his face as he surveyed the bruises. With practiced precision, he administered the hormone injection, his free hand gently stroking her hip in silent apology. "Thank you," Amanda murmured, leaning into his touch. Mike pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "I have to fly to Chicago tonight for the merger meeting. I'll be back tomorrow evening, in time for your ultrasound." Amanda nodded, disappointment flickering across her features before she could mask it. These business trips had become more frequent as Mike expanded topping enterprises, his absence a physical ache during the most difficult parts of their fertility journey. "It's just one night," he assured her, misreading her expression. "Reynolds needs me there to finalize the terms." "I know," Amanda said, forcing brightness into her voice. "The Henderson merger is important." Mike's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a frown. "That's the car. I need to grab my bag." As he hurried from the bathroom, Amanda caught her reflection in the mirror, the fatigue in her eyes, the slight pallor beneath her rich brown skin, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. She hardly recognized the vibrant woman who had once captivated a roomful of Manhattan's elite. Later that evening, alone in their penthouse, Amanda curled on the sofa with a stack of student artwork from her kindergarten class. Teaching had become her sanctuary, the one place where life proceeded with joyful normalcy, untouched by the shadow of infertility that had fallen over her marriage. The intercom buzzed, startling her from her thoughts. "Yes," she answered, pressing the button. "Mrs. Topping, there's a delivery for you," the doorman announced. Moments later, Amanda opened the door to find a stunning arrangement of white orchids, her favorite, accompanied by a small velvet box. The card read simply, "For my warrior, all my love, Mike." Inside the box nestled a delicate gold bracelet, a small charm in the shape of a star dangling from the chain. Amanda slipped it onto her wrist, tears welling in her eyes. These gestures reminded her of the Mike she had fallen in love with. Thoughtful, romantic, attuned to her, in ways that made her feel cherished beyond measure. She reached for her phone to thank him, but hesitated. Instead, she scrolled through her contacts and called Zora, her oldest friend. He sent flowers again, Amanda said when Zora answered. And jewelry. Guilt gifts? Zora asked, the concern evident in her voice. Don't call them that, Amanda protested weakly. He's trying. Amanda, Zora's voice softened. When was the last time you two talked about anything other than fertility treatments or his business? The question hung in the air, uncomfortably accurate. Their conversations had narrowed to clinical discussions of follicle counts and sperm motility, interspersed with Mike's updates on Topping Enterprises' latest acquisitions. The easy intimacy of their early marriage, the dreams shared in twilight, the laughter over inside jokes, the passionate nights that had nothing to do with conception, had faded like photographs left too long in sunlight. We're just focused right now, Amanda defended. Once we get through this phase. 5 years isn't a phase, honey, Zora interrupted gently. It's becoming your life. After hanging up, Amanda wandered to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. In the reflection, she could see the ghost of the woman she had been and the mother she longed to become, both just beyond her reach. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Did you get my surprise? It's beautiful, she typed back. I miss you. 3 dots appeared as he typed his response, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, miss you too. Big breakthrough on the merger. We'll tell you tomorrow. Amanda set her phone down, the familiar disappointment settling into her bones. Even in his gestures of love, business was never far from Mike's mind these days. The following evening, Amanda sat in Dr. Rivera's waiting room, checking her watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Mike was late. Again. The ultrasound would show whether her follicles had developed properly, a critical milestone in determining when the egg retrieval would occur. When her name was called, she sent Mike a quick text, "Going in now," and followed the nurse to the examination room. As she changed into the paper gown, she tried to quell the resentment rising within her. It wasn't fair to blame Mike for traffic or delayed meetings, especially when he was working so hard to afford these expensive treatments. Dr. Rivera entered with a warm smile that did little to mask the clinical assessment in his eyes. After 5 years, Amanda recognized the subtle shifts in his expression that telegraphed good or bad news. "How are we feeling today, Amanda?" he asked, preparing the ultrasound machine. "Hopeful," she replied automatically, the word worn smooth from repetition as the cold gel spread across her abdomen and the wand pressed against her skin. Amanda stared at the ceiling, counting the tiles as she had done dozens of times before. The door opened quietly, and Mike slipped in, still in his business suit, his expression apologetic as he took her hand. "Sorry," he mouthed, squeezing her fingers. Dr. Rivera studied the screen, the furrow between his brows deepening. "The response isn't what we hoped for," he said finally. "Only 2 follicles have developed adequately." Amanda closed her eyes, absorbing the blow. 2 follicles meant 2 potential eggs, and with Mike's condition, the odds dwindled further. "But we can proceed?" Mike asked, his voice taking on the sharp edge it did in business negotiations. "We can," Dr. Rivera confirmed, "though I would normally recommend waiting for a better cycle." "No," Mike said firmly. "We proceed." Amanda opened her eyes, shooting Mike a look. "Shouldn't we discuss this?" "What's to discuss?" Mike countered. "We've come this far. We're not stopping now." Dr. Rivera glanced between them, sensing the tension. "I'll give you 2 a moment," he said tactfully, exiting the room. As soon as the door closed, Amanda sat up, pulling the paper gown tighter around herself. "You can't just make these decisions unilaterally, Mike. It's my body going through this. Mike ran a hand through his hair. Frustration evident. I'm trying to give you what you want, what we both want, a baby. At what cost? Amanda's voice cracked. Do you even see me anymore, or am I just a means to an end? A problem to be solved? Mike flinched as if she'd struck him. That's not fair. I'm doing everything I can. Everything except being present, Amanda interrupted. Do you know how many appointments I've attended alone this month? How many nights I've injected myself because you were working late? I'm working to pay for all this. Mike gestured around the upscale fertility clinic. Do you have any idea what these treatments cost? Of course I do, but I never asked for the most expensive clinic in Manhattan. I never needed the penthouse, or the designer clothes, or any of it. I just needed you, Mike, the man who used to hold me when I cried, who saw me as more than just a potential mother. The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Mike's shoulders slumped, the armor of corporate confidence falling away to reveal the vulnerability beneath. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted quietly. The one thing you want most, I can't give you. Amanda's anger dissolved at the raw pain in his voice. She reached for him, drawing him close until his head rested against her chest. It's not about fixing, Mike. It's about remembering who we are beyond this struggle. She stroked his hair, feeling the tension in his body. Maybe Zora's right. Maybe we need to take a step back, rediscover each other. Mike pulled away, his expression hardening. Your follicles are ready now. We don't have the luxury of stepping back. Before Amanda could respond, a soft knock preceded Dr. Rivera's return. Mike straightened, his business mask slipping back into place. We'd like to proceed with the retrieval, he told the doctor, his tone brooking no argument. As Dr. Rivera outlined the next steps, Amanda watched her husband transform before her eyes, decisive, authoritative, completely in control. It was the same demeanor that had made him a formidable CEO, the same drive that had built topping enterprises into an empire. But as she lay back for the final ultrasound measurements, Amanda couldn't help wondering if that same determination was slowly eroding the foundation of their marriage, replacing love with an obsession that threatened to consume them both. That night, as Mike slept beside her, Amanda stared at the ceiling, one hand resting on her tender abdomen. The cycle would continue: egg retrieval, fertilization, anxious waiting, transfer, more waiting. And if it failed again, what then? How many more bruises? How many more disappointments? How much more distance could their marriage sustain? She turned to study her husband's profile in the moonlight. The strong jaw, now tight even in sleep, the furrow between his brows that never fully relaxed anymore. Beneath the ambition and the drive, Amanda glimpsed the shadow of inadequacy that had taken root since that fateful doctor's appointment 5 years ago. I still choose you, she whispered, too softly to wake him. Every day, I still choose you. I just wish you could believe that. But as dawn approached and sleep continued to elude her, Amanda wondered how long they could continue on this path before one of them broke under the weight of waiting. Chapter 3. A Poisonous Proposal. Pack. Is something nice for dinner? Mike had said, his voice lighter than Amanda had heard in months. I'm taking you to the lake house for the weekend. Now, as Amanda stood on the deck overlooking the still waters, she felt a cautious hope unfurling within her chest. The lake house had always been their sanctuary, a place where cell phones were silenced and the pressures of fertility treatments and corporate takeovers seemed to recede with the tide. This was where they had spent their first anniversary, where they had sketched dreams of family gatherings and children playing on the private beach below. The last failed IVF cycle had devastated them both. 2 weeks ago, Amanda had curled into herself on their bathroom floor after seeing the familiar single line on the pregnancy test, sobbing until her throat was raw. Mike had found her there, had wordlessly sat beside her, his own tears falling silently as he stroked her back. That night, they had lain in bed without speaking, the chasm between them wider than ever before, but something had changed in Mike after that. He had become uncharacteristically quiet, disappearing into his home office for hours, emerging with a determined set to his jaw that Amanda couldn't quite interpret. And then, this surprise trip. The door slid open behind her, and Mike stepped out carrying 2 glasses of wine. Sunset painted his face in golden hues, softening the lines of stress that had become a permanent fixture. "Beautiful evening," he commented, handing her a glass. Amanda accepted it with a small smile. "I've missed this place." "Me too." Mike leaned against the railing beside her, their shoulders just touching. "Do you remember the night we decided to buy it?" "Of course, you were so excited you couldn't sleep. You kept waking me up with new plans." "For renovations," Mike laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. "You indulged every crazy idea, even the boat lift that would have cost more than the house." "Because I loved seeing you dream," Amanda said softly. "You've always had this ability to envision possibilities where others see limitations." Mike turned. To her then, something unreadable in his expression. "I still do." They sat for dinner on the deck, candlelight flickering between them as they shared a meal Mike had arranged to be prepared by a local chef. For the first time in years, they spoke of things beyond fertility treatments and business, reminiscing about their early dating days, discussing a book Amanda had recently read, debating which constellations were visible in the night sky. As the evening deepened and stars emerged like scattered diamonds above them, Amanda felt herself relaxing, the constant weight of expectation and disappointment momentarily lifted. When Mike refilled her wine glass for the 3rd time, she raised an eyebrow. "Are you trying to get me drunk, Mr. Topping?" A shadow crossed his face before he attempted a smile. "Maybe just relaxed. I want to talk to you about something important." Amanda's stomach tightened, the pleasant haze of the evening dissipating. "Please don't tell me there's another fertility specialist, another protocol. I can't, Mike, I just can't right now." "It's not that," he assured her quickly. "It's an alternative I've been researching." He reached for her hand across the table, his fingers enclosing hers with unexpected intensity. "What would you say if I told you we could have a baby that's biologically yours? A child that carries your beautiful spirit, your intelligence, your compassion?" Amanda's heart stuttered. "What are you talking about?" "We've discussed adoption, but you've always been resistant." "Not adoption," Mike interrupted. "A baby that's genetically yours, carried by you." "Mike, we've been through this. Your condition—" "I know what my condition is," he cut in, a flash of the old pain crossing his features. "I'm talking about using a donor, someone carefully selected with the right genetics, the right background." Amanda pulled her hand away, confusion clouding her features. "A sperm donor? You've been dead set against that for years. You said you couldn't bear the thought of another man's child." "Not an anonymous donor," Mike said, his voice dropping lower. "Someone we know, someone we trust." The implication hung in the air between them, heavy as the humidity that clung to the summer night. Amanda stared at her husband, disbelief washing over her in cold waves. "You want me to sleep with another man?" The words emerged barely above a whisper, as if speaking them louder might make this surreal conversation more real. Mike's expression tightened. "I want us to have a child. By having me, what? Have an affair?" Amanda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the deck. "Who are you, and what have you done with my husband?" Mike rose too, reaching for her. "Amanda, please. I've thought this through." "Have you?" she challenged, stepping away from his touch. Have you really thought about what you're asking me to do? I'm asking you to help us create a family." His voice rose with frustration. "After 10 years of marriage, after everything we've tried, every disappointment, every tear you've shed, I'm offering you a solution." "A solution?" Amanda repeated incredulously. "You think me sleeping with someone else is a solution? To what exactly? Your wounded pride because your body can't do what you want it to." The moment the words left her mouth, Amanda regretted them. Mike's face crumpled, the careful composure he'd maintained all evening shattering. "Yes," he admitted quietly, "my pride, my failure. Is that what you want to hear? That I can't bear another year of watching you suffer through treatments that don't work because of me? That I lie awake at night, terrified you'll wake up one day and realize you married the wrong man?" Tears filled Amanda's eyes. "Mike, I have never, not once thought that. But you've thought about having a baby. You've dreamed about it, collected tiny socks for it, read parenting books in secret when you think I'm asleep." Mike's voice broke. "I've watched you shrink a little more with each negative test, and I can't stand it anymore." He sank back into his chair, head in his hands. "This is the only way I can give you what you want, what we both want." Amanda stood frozen, emotion warring within her, disbelief at what Mike was suggesting, anger that he would think this was something she could ever want. And beneath it all, a terrible, confused ache because part of her recognized the twisted sacrifice he was offering. A man driven to such desperate measures by his love for her and his own sense of inadequacy. "Who?" she finally asked, the question emerging strangled. Mike looked up, hope flickering across his features that she was at least willing to discuss it. "I've been thinking about Rich Hampton." "The architect?" Amanda's brow furrowed. "The one who designed this house," Mike nodded. "He's intelligent, attractive, successful. He has an impeccable background, no hereditary health issues, and he's discreet, trustworthy." "You've researched him like he's a thoroughbred," Amanda said, revulsion rising in her throat. "Have you approached him about this? Does he know you're offering your wife to him like some kind of—" "No!" Mike interrupted fiercely. "It's not like that. I would never discuss this with anyone before talking to you, and it would be clinical, professional." Amanda laughed bitterly. "Professional? There's nothing professional about what you're suggesting, Mike. This isn't a business transaction." "Of course it isn't." Mike stood again, moving toward her with pleading eyes. "Amanda, please try to understand. I'm trying to find a way forward. For us, a compromise." "A compromise," she repeated dully. "Most couples compromise on vacation destinations or what color to paint the living room, not on who the wife sleeps with." Mike flinched. "When you put it that way, there's no other way to put it," Amanda interrupted. "That's exactly what you're asking." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the shore below and the distant call of a night bird. Amanda's mind raced, trying to make sense of the unthinkable proposal Mike had laid before her. How had they arrived here, at this moment, where the man who had once promised to cherish her above all others was now suggesting she give herself to someone else? Yet even through her shock and hurt, a treacherous thought whispered through her consciousness. After 10 years of trying, of watching Mike withdraw further into himself with each failure, what other options remained? The specialists had been clear. Mike's condition was unlikely to improve. Adoption agencies had waiting lists years long, and their scrutiny of high-profile couples like themselves often resulted in rejections. "It would remain our secret," Mike said softly, breaking into her thoughts. "No one would ever know." Amanda wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. "How could we keep something like this secret? A child would be involved, Mike, a real human being, not some product of your bizarre plan. Rich would sign a non-disclosure agreement. He would have no rights to the child. As far as everyone would know, it would be a miracle, our miracle. The calculated nature of his planning sent a chill through Amanda. How long had he been considering this? How many sleepless nights had he spent crafting this scheme while she lay beside him unaware? "And what about Rich in all this?" she asked. "You think he'll just agree to father a child and walk away? What kind of man would do that?" "The kind who understands what's at stake," Mike replied. "The kind who respects the sanctity of our marriage enough to help us, not threaten it." Amanda stared at him, truly seeing the depths of his desperation for the first time. This wasn't just about giving her a child, it was about control, about maintaining the appearance of being the man who could provide everything his wife desired, even if the reality was something far messier. "I need time," she said finally. I can't even process what you're asking right now." Mike nodded, relief visible in the slackening of his shoulders. It wasn't a rejection, at least. "Take all the time you need." "But Amanda," he reached for her hand again, his eyes intense. "Think about what this could mean for us. A baby with your smile, your eyes, an end to the treatments, the disappointments, a new beginning." As Amanda lay awake that night in their lake house bedroom, Mike's steady breathing beside her, she stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine it. A child with her features, her blood running through its veins. The end of the painful journey they had been on for so long, but at what cost? And what did it say about their marriage that Mike could suggest such a thing? Yet as dawn broke over the lake, casting long shadows across their bed, Amanda found herself considering it, not with acceptance, but with a terrible understanding of the desperate place they had reached. If this was what it took to heal the wound that infertility had carved between them, if this was the sacrifice needed to rebuild what they had lost. "You're awake," Mike murmured, his hand finding hers in the early morning light. "I've been thinking," Amanda said, her voice barely audible. "If, and I mean if, we were to consider this, there would have to be rules, boundaries." Mike's fingers tightened around hers. "Anything you want. And afterwards, we would never speak of it again. It would be a closed chapter, something we did to create our family, nothing more." "Of course," he agreed quickly. "Once you're pregnant, everything goes back to normal, better than normal." Amanda turned to look at him, searching his face for any hint of doubt or resentment that might fester in the years to come. "Are you sure you could live with it, Mike? Truly live with it? Because I won't bring a child into an unstable home." "I'm sure," he said with such conviction that Amanda almost believed him. "This is the answer we've been looking for, Amanda. I know it in my heart." What neither of them knew as they lay there in the soft morning light, tentatively crafting the outlines of their desperate plan, was that Mike's assistant had inadvertently overheard their entire conversation the previous evening. His phone, meant to be shut off for the weekend, had been activated when he'd checked his email briefly during dinner. The call connected to his office line where his assistant, working late, had heard everything through the speakerphone, a poisonous secret that would, in time, shatter the fragile solution they were building. Chapter 4. The Arrangement. The Topping Enterprises headquarters lobby gleamed with polished marble and understated luxury. Amanda adjusted her blazer nervously as she approached the reception desk, hyper-aware that every employee who nodded respectfully in her direction had no idea why the CEO's wife was really there today. "Mrs. Topping," the receptionist greeted warmly. "Mr. Hampton is already in the conference room with your husband." Amanda's heart hammered against her ribs as she walked the familiar path to Mike's executive suite. 2 weeks had passed since that surreal night at the lake house. 2 weeks of tense negotiations between husband and wife about boundaries, expectations, and the moral implications of what they were considering. 2 weeks of Amanda vacillating between determination to heal her marriage and nauseating doubt about the path they were choosing. Mike had arranged everything with clinical precision. Rich Hampton had been contacted about designing a new corporate headquarters, a legitimate project that would explain his presence in their lives. Only later, if Amanda agreed, would the true nature of their arrangement be revealed to him. She paused outside the conference room, watching through the glass wall as Mike gestured animatedly at blueprints spread across the table. Across from him sat Rich Hampton, his profile strong against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The sleeves of his crisp white shirt were rolled up to reveal muscular forearms as he sketched something on the plans before him, his confident movements reflecting years of architectural expertise. Amanda had met Rich briefly years ago when he designed their lake house, but seeing him now, knowing why Mike had really summoned him, sent a flush of embarrassment across her cheeks. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. Both men looked up, and Rich immediately stood, a genuine smile warming his face. "Mrs. Topping," he said, extending his hand. "It's been too long." His palm was warm against hers, his grip firm but gentle. Amanda forced herself to meet his eyes. Kind eyes, she noted with surprise, with tiny laugh lines at the corners. "Please call me Amanda," she managed. "And yes, it has been a while. The lake house still stands as a testament to your talent." "One of my favorite projects," Rich admitted. "I drove by it last summer while working on a property nearby. The gardens. You've added a spectacular." Mike cleared his throat. "Rich has some innovative ideas for the new headquarters. Very forward-thinking." The next hour passed in discussion of sustainable materials and natural light sources, flexible workspaces, and rooftop gardens. Despite her initial discomfort, Amanda found herself genuinely engaged. Rich spoke about architecture with a passion that transformed the technical into the poetic, buildings as living entities that breathed and grew with their occupants. "I believe spaces shape how we feel, how we think, how we connect," Rich explained, sketching a curved wall that seemed to embrace rather than divide. "Your husband wants a monument to corporate achievement. I want to give him that, but also a place that nurtures the humans within it, a building with both presence and heart." Amanda glanced at Mike, who was studying Rich with calculated assessment. She recognized that look. Mike evaluating an acquisition, determining its worth and potential risks. "Amanda has an excellent eye," Mike said suddenly. "Perhaps you could consult with her on the interior concepts? She transformed our penthouse from a sterile showplace to an actual home." Rich turned to her with interest. "Would you be willing? I find the partnership between architectural structure and interior design fascinating." "Trapped," Amanda nodded. "I'd be happy to contribute." "Excellent," Mike smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Why don't you two continue this over lunch? I have another meeting, but you should get acquainted if you'll be collaborating." Before Amanda could object, Mike was gathering his papers. "The reservation at Marcel's is under my name. Take your time. Creative minds need space to explore possibilities." And just like that, Amanda found herself being maneuvered into the first step of Mike's methodical plan. Marcel's was intimate and exclusive, the kind of restaurant where privacy booths were soundproofed and waitstaff appeared only when summoned. Amanda sat across from Rich, hyper-aware of every movement, every word. "Your husband mentioned you were a kindergarten teacher," Rich said after they'd ordered. "That must be rewarding work." Amanda relaxed slightly at the neutral topic. "It is. There's something magical about witnessing a child connect with the world for the first time, seeing letters form into words, watching friendships bloom." "My sister teaches 3rd grade," Rich offered. "She says the same thing. That moment when a concept clicks for a student. She calls it the light bulb effect." "Exactly." Amanda found herself smiling genuinely. "It's like watching little universes expand." They fell into easy conversation about education, about Rich's journey from a Bronx childhood to award-winning architect, about Amanda's favorite exhibits at the Met. Not once did Rich mention Topping Enterprises or the new headquarters project. "May I ask you something?" Rich said as they lingered over coffee. "And feel free to tell me it's none of my business." Amanda tensed. "Of course. Why does your husband really want us to work together?" "Because I've designed plenty of corporate headquarters, and the CEO's wife isn't typically involved in the process." His directness caught Amanda off guard. She stared into her coffee cup, searching for an appropriate response. "Mike values my opinion," she said finally, the half-truth bitter on her tongue. Rich studied her for a long moment. "I get the feeling there's something happening beneath the surface here." Amanda looked up, meeting his perceptive gaze. Something about his straightforward manner made deception feel impossible. "It's complicated," she admitted. Rich nodded, not pushing further. "Life usually is. Just know that I don't play games, Amanda. Whatever's going on, I prefer honesty. Even when the truth is uncomfortable," she challenged quietly. "Especially then." His smile was gentle. Uncomfortable truths are usually the ones most worth facing. Over the next 3 weeks, Amanda met with Rich regularly under the pretext of the headquarters project. They toured buildings he'd designed, visited material showrooms, and spent hours in his studio examining models. With each meeting, her anxiety gradually transformed into genuine interest, not just in architecture, but in Rich himself. Unlike Mike, whose conversations increasingly revolved around business victories or fertility failures, Rich talked about everything. Books that had changed his perspective, his grandmother's secret recipe for buttermilk biscuits, the community center he was designing pro bono in Harlem. "Why architecture?" Amanda asked him one afternoon as they walked through an exhibit of Japanese minimalism at the Design Museum. Rich considered the question with the thoughtfulness she'd come to expect from him. "I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with 6 people. Space was precious, contested. I started dreaming about rooms that could transform, walls that could breathe." He stopped before an installation of a traditional tea room. "Architecture at its best isn't about constructing barriers, but creating possibilities. Defining space without confining it." "That's beautiful," Amanda murmured. "What about you?" Rich asked. "Why teaching?" "Children are still honest," she replied after a moment. "They haven't learned to hide their wonder or their hurt. There's something sacred about that, being trusted with someone's unfiltered self." Rich's eyes met hers with unexpected intensity. "Yes," he said softly, "there is." That evening, as Amanda described their day to Mike, she found herself carefully editing her words, omitting the moments of connection, the lingering glances, the way Rich's laugh made something long dormant stir within her. Mike listened with narrowed focus. "Do you think he likes you?" The question, so boldly strategic, made Amanda's stomach turn. "We get along well enough?" "Good," Mike nodded, satisfied. "I've had him thoroughly vetted. His genetic profile is excellent. No family history of heart, disease, cancer, or mental illness. His IQ tested in the top percentile at university." "Stop it," Amanda whispered, bile rising in her throat. "He's a person, not a breeding specimen." Mike sighed, taking her hand. "I'm sorry. I just want everything to be perfect." His eyes softened with rare vulnerability. "Are you still sure about this, Amanda? We can stop if you've changed your mind." For a moment, Amanda considered it, stepping back from the precipice before them, returning to their painful but familiar struggle. But then she remembered the hollow emptiness of their marriage these past years, the mechanical intimacy, the growing distance that no amount of fertility treatments could bridge. "I haven't changed my mind," she said quietly, "but I need more time with him before we explain the arrangement." Mike nodded, relief evident in his posture. "Take all the time you need." The following week, Amanda ran into Rich unexpectedly at an art gallery in Chelsea. She had gone seeking solitude, a place to clear her head from the mounting tension at home. seeing him studying a massive abstract canvas. His profile, contemplative in the gallery's soft lighting, sent an undeniable ripple of pleasure through her. "Fancy meeting you here," she said, approaching him. Rich turned, surprise giving way to a warm smile. "Amanda, I was just thinking this painting reminded me of something you said about negative space last week." They moved through the gallery together, their observations flowing into easy conversation. Afterward, Rich suggested coffee at a small cafe tucked away on a tree-lined street. "No business talk," he stipulated as they settled at a corner table. "I'd like to get to know the real Amanda Baldwin, not just Mrs. Topping." The distinction, her maiden name used deliberately, wasn't lost on Amanda. She found herself sharing stories she hadn't thought about in years. Summers spent at her grandmother's house in Virginia, her college dreams of becoming a writer, the semester she'd spent teaching in South Africa. "What happened to the writing?" Rich asked. Amanda shrugged, toying with her cup. "Life, I suppose, marriage, trying to start a family." "Any luck with that?" The question was gentle, without the pitying undertone she'd grown accustomed to. "No," Amanda admitted. 10 years of trying, actually." Rich's hand moved across the table, coming to rest beside hers, not touching, but close enough that she could feel its warmth. "I'm sorry. That must be incredibly difficult." The simple acknowledgement, free from advice or platitudes, loosened something within Amanda. Before she could stop herself, the whole painful journey spilled out. The tests, the treatments, the slowly fracturing relationship with Mike. "The worst part is watching something that began with so much love turn into this clinical transaction," she confessed. "Sometimes I don't recognize us anymore." Rich listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. "What do you want, Amanda? Not what Mike wants or what the doctors think is possible. What do you want?" The question, so simple yet so rarely asked, caught her off guard. "I want to feel whole again," she answered finally. "With or without a child. I want to remember who I am beyond this struggle." Their eyes met across the table, and in that moment Amanda felt truly seen for the first time in years. "Thank you," Rich said softly. "For what?" "For trusting me with your truth." As they left the cafe, stepping into the golden light of late afternoon, Rich's hand brushed against hers, a fleeting touch that sent electricity racing up her arm. Amanda found herself wondering what it would be like to be held by those hands, to be wanted for herself rather than for the child she might bear. The thought should have filled her with guilt. Instead, it kindled something that felt dangerously like hope. A week later, Mike announced that it was time to move forward with their plan. He had invited Rich to dinner at their penthouse where they would present their proposition. "He's clearly comfortable with you now," Mike reasoned, as Amanda prepared nervously for the evening. "I've drawn up the paperwork, a non-disclosure agreement, a waiver of parental rights, everything we discussed." Amanda stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. "And you think he'll just agree to father a child and walk away?" "He'll be generously compensated," Mike replied, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. "And it's not as if he'd have no contact. He'd be part of the child's life as a family friend, someone special but not parental." "Have you considered that he might find the whole idea repulsive? That he might never want to work with you again?" Mike's expression hardened slightly. "I've considered every contingency. Rich Hampton is a pragmatist as well as an idealist. He'll understand what we're offering." The doorbell rang, cutting off any further discussion. Amanda took a steadying breath, smoothed her dress, and followed Mike to greet their guest. Rich looked handsome in a charcoal suit, a bottle of wine in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. "For the hostess," he explained, handing Amanda the bag. Inside was a first edition copy of Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, a book she had mentioned admiring during one of their conversations. You remembered, she said softly, touched by the thoughtfulness. Of course. His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners warmly. Mike observed the exchange with calculating assessment. Let's have a drink before dinner, shall we? I have a special bottle of scotch I've been saving. In the living room, Mike directed the conversation with practiced charm, asking about Rich's current projects, sharing anecdotes from topping enterprises' early days, creating an atmosphere of male camaraderie. Amanda watched the performance with growing unease, knowing what was coming. After their second drink, as the housekeeper announced dinner was ready, Mike set down his glass and straightened. Before we eat, there's something important Amanda and I would like to discuss with you, Rich. Rich glanced between them, his expression shifting from relaxed to cautious. I'm listening. Mike launched into a carefully prepared speech about friendship, trust, and the challenges he and Amanda had faced in their fertility journey. With clinical detachment, he explained his own medical condition, the failed treatments, and their desire for a child that carried Amanda's genetic heritage. Rich's face remained impressively neutral throughout, though his eyes sought Amanda's several times as Mike spoke. When Mike finally arrived at their proposal, laying it out in euphemistic terms that couldn't quite disguise its fundamental nature, a heavy silence fell over the room. Let me be sure I understand, Rich said finally, his voice measured. You're asking me to father a child with Amanda, a child that you would raise as your own, with me maintaining no paternal rights, but some undefined role in the child's life. Precisely. Mike nodded, as if they were discussing a business merger rather than the creation of a human life. Of course, you would be generously compensated for your contribution. Rich's expression darkened. I don't need compensation, Mike. What I need is to speak with Amanda. Alone. Mike stiffened. Anything you have to say should be said to your wife directly, Rich interrupted firmly, since she's the one you're suggesting I sleep with. The blunt language made Amanda flinch, but Mike, after a moment of visible calculation, nodded. Of course, use my study. I'll check on dinner. When they were alone, Rich turned to Amanda, all pretense of neutrality gone. Is this what you want? And I need the truth, Amanda, not what you think you should say. Amanda looked down at her hands, twisted tightly in her lap. I don't know what I want anymore, she admitted. Everything has become so complicated, so far from the life I thought we'd have. Look at me, Rich requested softly. When she raised her eyes to his, he continued, this isn't just about a baby, is it? This is about saving your marriage, Faye. Insight so accurately pinpointing what she hadn't fully acknowledged even to herself broke something open inside Amanda. Tears welled in her eyes. We've lost our way, she whispered. 10 years of disappointment has hollowed us out. Sometimes I look at Mike and wonder if there's anything left between us except this desperate chase for what we can't have. Rich moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. And you think having a child, my child, will fix that? I don't know, Amanda admitted, but it's the only solution Mike can accept. He can't bear the thought of failing me. And what? About what you can bear? Rich asked, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. Can you bear creating a child in such calculated circumstances? Can you bear the deception that would follow? Can you bear sharing something so intimate with someone, only to pretend it never happened? The questions laid bare the moral compromises inherent in Mike's plan. Amanda shook her head slightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't think I can, she whispered, but I don't see another way forward. Rich reached up, gently brushing a tear from her face. There's always another way, Amanda. Sometimes it just requires more courage to find it. In that moment, with his gentle touch and understanding eyes, Amanda felt something shift irrevocably within her heart. This wasn't just about Mike's plan anymore. Something real was developing between her and Rich, something unexpected and fragile and terrifying in its potential. When Mike returned, finding them in quiet conversation, his eyes narrowed at their proximity, at the lingering intimacy evident in their posture. "Have you reached a decision?" he asked Rich, his tone carefully neutral. Rich stood, facing Mike with direct honesty. "I need time to consider what you're asking. It's not a small thing, bringing a child into the world." "Of course," Mike agreed smoothly, though Amanda detected the disappointment beneath his composed exterior. "Take all the time you need." As they moved to the dining room for a dinner that now felt like an elaborate charade, Amanda caught Rich's gaze across the table. In his eyes, she saw a question forming, one that had nothing to do with Mike's arrangement and everything to do with what was growing between them. A question she wasn't ready to answer, but couldn't stop herself from considering. What if this wasn't about creating a child at all? What if it was about creating a new beginning, one neither of them had anticipated, but which now seemed as inevitable as the tide pulling towards shore? Chapter 5. Crossing Lines. Rain pounded against the windows of Rich's studio loft, turning the Manhattan skyline into a blur of distorted lights. Amanda stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching lightning slice through the evening sky, her reflection ghost-like against the storm beyond. "Tea?" Rich appeared beside her, offering a steaming mug. "Thank you." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, a momentary touch that sent warmth cascading through her. 2 weeks had passed since that uncomfortable dinner at the penthouse. 2 weeks of Amanda avoiding Mike's questioning looks, deflecting his increasingly impatient inquiries about whether she'd spoken to Rich. 2 weeks of her making excuses to see Rich, ostensibly about the headquarters project, but increasingly about everything else. "Penny for your thoughts?" Rich leaned against the window frame, his voice gentle. Amanda sighed, cradling the mug between her palms. "I was supposed to be at a charity gala with Mike tonight. Yet here you are. Yet here." "I am," she echoed, turning to face him. "In the middle of a storm, hiding from my husband, drinking tea with a man I barely knew a month ago." Rich studied her thoughtfully. "Are you hiding from Mike, or from a decision you don't want to make?" The question cut through her defenses with surgical precision. Amanda moved away from the window, wandering through Rich's open-concept living space. Unlike the sterile perfection of her penthouse, his home felt authentically lived in. Architectural books stacked on coffee tables, jazz records beside a vintage player, half-finished sketches pinned to corkboards. "He calls me every day asking if I've discussed his proposition with you," Amanda admitted, stopping before a wall of black and white photographs. "He's becoming obsessed with the idea that this is our last chance." Rich set his mug down and moved to stand behind her, close, enough that she could feel his warmth without quite touching. "And what do you tell him? That you're still considering it? That these things take time?" She turned to face him, suddenly needing to see his eyes. "But the truth is, I haven't asked you again because I'm afraid of your answer, either way. Afraid I'll say yes or afraid I'll say no." Rich's voice was soft, his gaze steady. "Both," Amanda whispered. "If you say yes, we cross a line that can't be uncrossed. If you say no..." She trailed off, unable to articulate the complicated grief that possibility evoked. Rich reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she chose, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've been thinking about nothing else since that night, Amanda," her heart stuttered. And I can't do it. Not the way Mike proposed." Relief and disappointment tangled inside her with equal measure. "I understand," she managed, stepping back slightly. It was an impossible thing to ask. "That's not why," Rich said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I can't pretend to be a clinical donor when—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "When I've developed feelings for you that are anything but clinical." The confession hung in the air between them, electric as the storm outside. Amanda felt her carefully maintained composure beginning to fracture. "Rich, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know you're married. I know you came to me because of a specific arrangement. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just couldn't proceed with Mike's plan without being honest about where I stand." Amanda moved deeper into the loft, needing physical distance to think clearly. The truth was, she'd been fighting her own growing feelings for weeks. The quickening of her pulse when Rich entered a room, the way conversation flowed between them without effort, the sense of being truly seen when he looked at her. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she said finally, facing him across the room. "You were supposed to be a solution, not a complication," Rich supplied with a sad smile. "Not someone I couldn't stop thinking about," Amanda corrected quietly. The admission changed something in the air between them. Rich crossed the room slowly, deliberately, giving her every opportunity to retreat. When he reached her, he took her hands in his, thumbs tracing gentle circles against her skin. "I need to tell you something, Amanda, something that might change how you see all of this." She looked up at him, pulse quickening. "What is it?" "I knew who you were long before Mike contacted me about the headquarters project." His voice was steady, but Amanda sensed the tension beneath it. "5 years ago, I was at a fundraiser for early childhood education. You were the keynote speaker." Recognition dawned slowly. "The literacy initiative. You were there?" Rich nodded. "You spoke about how stories build bridges between worlds, how they help children imagine possibilities beyond their circumstances. I've never forgotten it." He paused, his expression vulnerable. "Or you." "You never mentioned this," Amanda said, trying to process the implications. "How could I? When Mike reached out about the project, I thought it was coincidence. Then, when I met with you both, I realized it wasn't the headquarters he was interested in at all." Rich's grip on her hands tightened slightly. "I should have walked away the moment I understood what he was planning, but I couldn't, not without seeing you again." The revelation should have alarmed her, but instead, Amanda felt a curious sense of fate unfolding. "So you agreed to the project knowing it was ethically complicated?" "Yes." Rich's honesty was unflinching. "I told myself I was just curious to see if the woman I remembered was as remarkable in person. Then I met with you, talked with you, and Amanda prompted, heart thundering in her chest. "And she was even more extraordinary than I remembered." The raw emotion in his voice made Amanda's breath catch. "The way you talk about your students, your passion for education, how you see beauty in things most people overlook. I found myself looking forward to our meetings like nothing else." "Rich," Amanda whispered, overwhelmed by his confession. "I know this isn't what you came here for tonight," he continued. "You came to discuss Mike's arrangement, to find clarity. Instead, I'm making everything more complicated." He released her hands and stepped back slightly. "I'm sorry for that." The absence of his touch left Amanda feeling strangely bereft. The ethical boundaries of the situation were hopelessly blurred now. Her marriage to Mike, with its increasing emotional distance, the arrangement he had proposed, and these new, undeniable feelings for Rich. "I should go," she said, though every part of her resisted the idea. "Is that what you want?" Rich asked, his voice low. Amanda closed her eyes, the question penetrating to her core. What did she want? For so long, her desires had been subsumed by the desperate quest for a baby, by Mike's needs and insecurities, by the carefully constructed image they presented to the world. "No," she admitted finally, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "That's not what I want." Rich moved toward her, again slowly and deliberately. When he stood before her, he raised his hand to gently cup her face. "Tell me what you want, Amanda. No arrangements, no expectations, just the truth." The storm outside had intensified, rain lashing against the windows in rhythmic waves that matched the pounding of her heart. In that moment, with lightning briefly illuminating Rich's face, his eyes filled with a tenderness Mike hadn't shown her in years, Amanda made her choice. "You," she whispered. "I want you." The confession broke something open inside her, fear and desire and guilt all rushing forth at once. Rich must have seen it in her eyes because he drew her close, one arm wrapping around her waist while his other hand still cradled her face. "We don't have to do anything," he assured her. "We can just talk, just be together without—" Amanda silenced him by pressing her lips to his. The kiss began tentatively, a question asked and answered in the gentle pressure of mouths meeting. Then Rich's arms tightened around her, and the kiss deepened into something urgent and consuming. Years of emotional drought made Amanda desperate for this connection, this moment of being wanted simply for herself rather than for what her body might produce. Rich's hands moved reverently over her, as if memorizing her. The curve of her waist, the arch of her spine, the texture of her hair between his fingers. "Amanda," he breathed against her neck. "Are you sure?" In answer, she took his hand and led him toward his bedroom. Outside, thunder rumbled as if in warning, but Amanda no longer cared about consequences or complications. For this one night, she would reclaim herself from the clinical machinery of fertility treatments and Mike's increasingly transactional view of their marriage. Rich's bedroom was simply furnished. A platform bed with crisp white sheets, a wall of bookshelves, a single abstract painting in blues and golds above the headboard. As they crossed the threshold, he turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Before this goes any further, I need you to understand something," he said, framing her face with his hands. "This isn't about Mike's arrangement. This isn't me agreeing to be a donor. This is just us, you and me, choosing each other." Tears welled in Amanda's eyes at the distinction, so crucially important, so dramatically different from the clinical transaction Mike had proposed. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm here." Their coming together was nothing like the mechanical intimacy Amanda had grown accustomed to with Mike in recent years. Rich undressed her slowly, with reverence, his touch igniting sensations she had forgotten her body could feel. Each kiss, each caress was an affirmation rather than a means to an end. When they finally joined, Amanda felt tears slip from beneath her closed eyelids, not from guilt or regret, but from the overwhelming relief of connection. Rich kissed them away, whispering her name like a prayer against her skin. Afterward, lying in his arms with rain still drumming against the windows, Amanda experienced a peace she hadn't known in years. Rich's fingers traced lazy patterns along her spine, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. "I should feel guilty," she murmured into the quiet darkness. Rich's hand stilled on her back. "Do you?" Amanda considered the question honestly. "No," she admitted finally, "and that probably makes me a terrible person. Or maybe it just makes you human," Rich suggested, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. "Someone who needed to remember. She's more than a potential mother, more than a wife, more than a vessel for someone else's dreams." The insight struck Amanda with such clarity that fresh tears threatened. How long had it been since anyone had seen her so completely? "What happens now?" she asked, suddenly afraid of the morning and all it would bring. The return to her life with Mike, the pretense, the impossible situation they had created. Rich tucked her closer against him. "Now we sleep. Tomorrow we talk. We figure this out together. Mike will know. Amanda whispered. "The moment he sees me, he'll know something has changed." "Would that be so terrible?" Rich asked gently. "Maybe it's time for truth, Amanda, for all of us." The thought was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Amanda had spent so long maintaining appearances, suppressing her own needs for the sake of Mike's fragile ego and their shared desperation for a child. The prospect of honesty, messy, complicated, necessary honesty, loomed both as threat and promise. "I never meant for this to happen," she said softly. "Neither did I," Rich admitted. "But I can't bring myself to regret it." As Amanda drifted toward sleep in Rich's arms, one thought surfaced with unexpected clarity. Whatever came next, pregnancy or not, confession or continued deception, tonight had changed her irrevocably. She had crossed a line, yes, but perhaps it was a line that needed crossing, a boundary between the life she had accepted and the one she truly desired. What neither of them could know as they lay tangled together while the storm gradually subsided outside was that this night would indeed result in the pregnancy Mike had so desperately orchestrated. But it would come wrapped in complications and consequences far beyond what any of them had imagined when this dangerous game began. Morning light filtered through Rich's bedroom windows, painting golden stripes across the rumpled sheets. Amanda stirred, momentarily disoriented before memory rushed back. The storm, Rich's confession, the night they had spent discovering each other. Rich was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression of quiet wonder. "I was afraid I'd dreamed you," he murmured, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. Amanda caught his hand, pressing a kiss to his palm. "Not a dream. Though what happens when I leave here might become a nightmare." Rich's expression sobered. "We need to talk about that." They dressed slowly, reluctantly, each layer of clothing rebuilding the barriers between them. In Rich's kitchen, over coffee and toast, neither of them really wanted. They faced the impossible situation they had created. "I can't continue with Mike's arrangement," Rich said firmly. "Not after last night. Not when what I feel for you is so far from the clinical transaction he proposed." Amanda nodded, staring into her coffee cup. "And I can't go back to pretending, to being a vessel for Mike's desperate need to create a legacy." "So where does that leave us?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Amanda looked up, meeting Rich's eyes across the table. "I don't know," she admitted. 10 years of marriage isn't easy to walk away from, even when it's become what mine has. "I would never ask you to," Rich assured her. "Whatever you decide, whatever you need, I'll respect it." The selflessness of his response brought tears to Amanda's eyes. How different from Mike's increasingly manipulative tactics, his single-minded focus on achieving parenthood at any cost. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to think, to figure out what happens next." Rich reached across the table, taking her hand. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As Amanda stood to leave, gathering her purse and the remnants of her composure, Rich pulled her into one last embrace. Tender, rather than passionate, supportive, rather than possessive. "Whatever happens," he whispered against her hair, "know that last night meant everything to me. You mean everything to me." Amanda held him tightly, memorizing the feel of his arms around her, the scent of his skin, the steady beat of his heart against hers. Then she stepped back, summoning the strength to face what waited beyond his door. "I'll call you," she promised. Rich nodded, his eyes reflecting both hope and resignation. "I'll be here." As Amanda left his building and stepped into the bright morning light, she felt simultaneously lighter and heavier than she had in years. The weight of deception had been replaced by the burden of truth, a truth that would, in time, shatter the careful facade of her marriage and set in motion events none of them could have foreseen. What she couldn't know, as she hailed a taxi, To take her home to the penthouse and the husband who waited there was that she already carried within her the child they had sought for so long, conceived not in clinical calculation, but in a moment of genuine connection with a man who saw her for herself, not just for what her body could create. Chapter 6. Betrayal's Sharp Edge. 6 weeks after that rainy night in Rich's loft, Amanda sat on the edge of her bathtub staring at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines, unmistakable, undeniable. After 10 years of heartbreak and failed treatments, she was pregnant. Her first instinct was to call Rich. In the weeks since their night together, they had maintained careful distance, communicating sparingly about the headquarters project, avoiding being alone together. But the connection between them remained, an invisible thread pulling her thoughts toward him at odd moments throughout her days. But it was Mike she needed to tell first. Mike, who had orchestrated this entire situation, never suspecting that when his plan finally succeeded, it would be because of genuine feelings rather than clinical arrangement. That evening, Amanda prepared Mike's favorite meal, a simple gesture to cushion the complicated news she carried. When he arrived home, his eyes brightened at the sight of the candles, the wine poured only in his glass, the careful presentation. "What's the occasion?" he asked, kissing her cheek. Amanda took a deep breath. "I have news." Something in her. Her tone made Mike go still, his eyes suddenly sharp with attention. "What kind of news?" "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Mike's expression transformed, shock giving way to disbelief, then an incandescent joy that Amanda hadn't seen in years. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen despite her protests. "Careful," she laughed despite herself, his excitement momentarily contagious. "I knew it would work," Mike declared, setting her down but keeping his hands on her waist. "I knew Rich was the right choice." "When did it happen? How far along are you?" Amanda's smile faltered. 6 weeks, approximately. Mike's brow furrowed with confusion. 6 weeks? But you and Rich only had dinner together. His voice trailed off as calculation dawned on his face. "You didn't tell me." Amanda began, but Mike cut her off. "You didn't tell me it had happened." His tone shifted from confusion to accusation. "You've been keeping this from me for 6 weeks?" "I needed time," Amanda said carefully. "This situation is complicated, Mike. You have to admit that." Mike's hands dropped from her waist, his expression hardening. "What's complicated? We had an agreement. You and Rich conceived a child, our child." He emphasized the last words, his voice taking on an edge Amanda recognized as the beginning of his corporate ruthlessness. "Unless there's something else you're not telling me." The moment stretched between them, a precipice Amanda knew would change everything. Before she could respond, Mike's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. "Reynolds," he muttered. "I have to take this." Amanda watched him retreat. To his office, relief and dread warring within her. The momentary reprieve wouldn't last. Eventually, she would need to tell Mike the full truth. That what had happened with Rich wasn't the clinical arrangement he had proposed, but something far more threatening to their marriage. Over the next few days, however, Mike seemed to move past his initial suspicion. His focus shifted entirely to preparations for the baby, ordering custom furniture for the nursery, researching the most exclusive preschools in Manhattan, even discussing names, though they were months from needing them. "Alexandra for a girl," he declared one evening, showing Amanda a spreadsheet of carefully analyzed options. "Strong, classic with good nickname potential. For a boy, I'm thinking William." Amanda nodded absently, guilt gnawing at her with each enthusiastic plan Mike made. She had still not contacted Rich about the pregnancy, unsure how to navigate the ethical minefield they now found themselves in. The decision was made for her, when Mike announced they would be attending the annual Business Leaders Charity Gala, an event where Rich would certainly be present due to his work on the headquarters project. "We should share our good news," Mike said, adjusting his bow tie as they prepared to leave. "Discreetly, of course, but I want people to know we're expecting. It's time to celebrate." Amanda's stomach knotted with anxiety. "Don't you think it's a bit early? Most people wait until the second trimester." "Nonsense," Mike dismissed her concern. "Everything will be fine. This is our miracle, Amanda, our perfect ending to a difficult journey." At the gala, Amanda moved through the elegant crowd in a constant state of nervous anticipation, scanning each group for Rich's familiar figure. When she finally spotted him across the ballroom, their eyes locked in an instant of silent communication. The longing she saw there matched her own, complicated by the new life she now carried. His child, though he didn't yet know it. "Amanda." A voice broke their connection. Lisa Weber, wife of Mike's CFO, air-kissed her cheeks. "You're absolutely glowing. Mike just told us the wonderful news. After all this time, it's a miracle." Amanda forced a smile, heart pounding. "Thank you. We're very happy." "And so secretive," Lisa teased. Mike wouldn't share any details about the treatments that finally worked. "Whatever it was, you must be thrilled it's finally happened." Across the room, Amanda could see Rich watching. The exchange, confusion evident in his expression. The evening progressed in a blur of congratulations and well wishes, each one driving the knife of guilt deeper. Amanda managed to slip away briefly, finding momentary solitude on a terrace overlooking the city. "Is it true?" Rich's voice came from behind her. Amanda turned, emotion tightening her throat at the sight of him. "Yes." Rich moved closer, his eyes dropping to her stomach, though there was nothing yet visible. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I only found out last week," Amanda admitted. "I've been trying to figure out what to do, how to handle this." "Is it?" Rich hesitated, the question hanging incomplete between them. "Yours," Amanda finished softly. "Yes. There's been no one else." The impact of her confirmation was visible in Rich's face, joy and fear and wonder all bleeding together. His hand lifted, hovering near her abdomen but not quite touching. "Our baby," he whispered. The tenderness in his voice brought tears to Amanda's eyes. "Rich, it's so complicated. Mike is ecstatic. He thinks this is the result of his arrangement that I performed a service?" Rich's expression hardened slightly. "Is that what you want him to believe?" Before Amanda could respond, the terrace doors opened and Mike's assistant, Vanessa, stepped out. Her eyes widened at the sight of them standing so close together, Rich's hand still suspended near Amanda's middle. "Mrs. Topping," she said stiffly. "Mr. Topping is looking for you. The keynote is about to begin." "Thank you, Vanessa," Amanda replied, trying to sound casual. "I'll be right there." As Vanessa retreated, Rich captured Amanda's hand. "We need to talk, properly, privately. This changes everything." "I know," Amanda whispered. "I'll call you tomorrow." But tomorrow never came. Instead, the headline of the business section the next morning carried a bombshell. "Topping Enterprises. CEO's wife in alleged affair with prominent architect." Amanda stared at the article in horror, reading snippets of sources close to the couple, claiming she had betrayed Mike during his business trips, using the headquarters project as cover for romantic meetings with Rich. "What is this?" she demanded when Mike stormed into the kitchen, face thunderous with rage. "I should ask you the same question," he hissed, slamming the newspaper down. "Vanessa saw you last night with Hampton, saw the way he looked at you, the intimate conversation." "This wasn't part of our arrangement, Amanda." "Mike, let me explain." "Explain what?" "That while I was working to give you what you wanted, a baby, you were falling in love with the sperm donor." Mike's voice cracked with fury. "Do you have any idea what this does to my reputation, what people are saying?" "So that's what you're worried about, your reputation?" Amanda felt ice forming around her heart. Not the truth, not our marriage. The truth, Mike laughed bitterly. The truth is that I gave you everything, a perfect life, unlimited resources for fertility treatments, even my pride when I suggested this arrangement, and you repaid me with betrayal. That's not what happened. Mike, if you would just listen. I'm done listening, Mike cut her off. I have a press conference in an hour. I need to get ahead of this before it destroys everything I've built. Cold dread washed over Amanda. What are you going to say? Mike straightened his tie, his expression shifting into the impassive mask she recognized from his hardest business negotiations. What needs to be said? 2 hours later, Amanda watched in stunned disbelief as Mike stood before a gathered press. Corpse, his face a perfect picture of dignified pain. It is with deep personal sadness that I must address the rumors circulating about my marriage, he began. While I had hoped to share joyful news of our expected child after years of fertility struggles, I must instead confirm that my wife, Amanda, has been engaging in an affair with architect Richard Hampton. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mike continued, his voice breaking at calculated moments. This betrayal comes at a particularly painful time, as we had recently received hope that our latest round of fertility treatments had been successful. I now have reason to question the paternity of the child my wife carries. Amanda sank to the floor of their living room, nausea rising as Mike systematically destroyed her reputation while painting himself as the victim. Not once did he mention his own role in bringing Rich into their lives. The arrangement he had proposed, the years of emotional distance that had driven her to seek connection elsewhere. By evening, her phone was filled with messages, some offering support, others expressing shock and disappointment. The most devastating was from her school principal, gently suggesting she take a leave of absence until the situation resolves. When Mike returned to the penthouse, he found Amanda sitting in the dark, surrounded by packed suitcases. "What's this?" he demanded. "I'm leaving," Amanda said simply. "What you did today was unforgivable." Mike's facade cracked slightly. "Unforgivable? What about what you did? Falling in love with him wasn't part of the plan." "There should never have been a plan, Mike. You can't orchestrate people's lives and emotions like one of your corporate takeovers." Amanda stood, one hand instinctively covering her stomach. "You've saved your reputation by destroying mine. I hope it was worth it. Where will you go?" Mike's voice held no concern, only calculation. "That's no longer your business." Amanda lifted her chin, finding strength she hadn't known she possessed. "But know this, the child I'm carrying is Rich's, not because of your arrangement, but because something real happened between us. Something you and I lost years ago." Mike's expression turned to stone. "If you walk out that door, don't expect anything from me. Not support, not understanding, certainly not forgiveness. I stopped expecting those things from you long ago," Amanda replied softly. "The only difference is that now I've stopped pretending it doesn't matter." As Amanda's car pulled away from the building that had been her home for 10 years, she felt equal measures of terror and liberation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rich. "I'm here, whatever you need." Through the blur of tears, Amanda typed a response with trembling fingers. "I need somewhere safe to fall apart. And then I need to figure out how to put myself back together." What she didn't yet know was that Mike's public betrayal was just the beginning. In the coming weeks, as her pregnancy progressed and her former life disintegrated, Amanda would discover depths of strength she never knew she possessed, and a love worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Chapter 7. Shelter in the Storm. Amanda stared at the cottage's worn wooden door, her suitcases at her feet and uncertainty wrapping around her like the autumn mist. The small property, nestled on the outskirts of the city, had belonged to her grandmother, a peaceful retreat she had inherited years ago, but rarely visited during her marriage to Mike. Now it represented her only sanctuary. Inside, dust covers shrouded the furniture like ghosts of a simpler life. Amanda moved through the space slowly, pulling sheets away to reveal her grandmother's well-loved sofa, the rocking chair where she had told Amanda stories as a child, the small writing desk positioned to catch morning light through east-facing windows. This would be her home now, this and the life growing inside her. Amanda's phone buzzed for the 20th time that day. Most calls she had ignored. Reporters seeking comment, former friends whose curiosity outweighed their loyalty, Mike's lawyers beginning the process of untangling their lives. But this call was from Rich, and she couldn't bring herself to ignore him any longer. "I'm okay," she said when she answered, the tremor in her voice betraying the lie. "Tell me where you are," Rich replied, concern evident in every syllable. "You shouldn't be alone right now." Amanda hesitated. The scandal had already cost her so much, her reputation, her job, friendships built over years. Inviting Rich into this new space felt like another irrevocable step. "I need time," she said finally, "to process everything, to figure out next steps." "Of course," Rich's voice softened. "But Amanda, you're carrying our child. Please don't shut me out completely." Our child. The words resonated through her with complicated emotion. This baby, conceived in genuine connection rather than clinical arrangement, had become the epicenter of a storm that had destroyed the life she'd known. "The cottage on Maple Lane," she relented, "my grandmother's place." 2 hours later, a gentle knock at the door announced Rich's arrival. He stood on the porch with grocery bags in both hands, rain dampening his shoulders. "I thought you might need supplies," he explained, his eyes taking in her exhausted state with quiet concern. Amanda stepped back to let him enter, grateful and apprehensive in equal measure. Rich moved through the small kitchen with surprising ease, unpacking essentials, prenatal vitamins, fresh fruit, bread, soup, herbal tea. He worked silently, respecting the fragile bubble of calm she had created. "The media circus is intense," he said finally, setting a mug of ginger tea before her. "I've been advised to make no comment." "By your lawyer?" Amanda asked. Rich nodded. "And yours should be saying the same. Mike's version of events is strategic, designed to protect himself at your expense." Amanda wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "He's erased his own role completely. No one knows he orchestrated the whole situation." "We could tell them," Rich suggested carefully. "Set the record straight." "And say what? That my husband offered me to another man like some kind of broodmare? That I was supposed to sleep with you as a transaction but instead fell—" She stopped abruptly, the unfinished confession hanging between them. Rich moved to sit beside her, close enough to offer support, but not touching. "What do you need from me, Amanda? Just tell me, and it's yours." The simple offer, so different from Mike's calculated maneuvers and conditional support, broke something inside her. Tears came suddenly, violently, years of suppressed grief and recent trauma pouring out. Rich gathered her against his chest, holding her through the storm, murmuring gentle reassurances against her hair. "I've lost everything," she whispered. When the tears finally subsided, "Not everything," Rich countered softly, one hand moving to rest lightly over hers on her still flat abdomen. "And not me. I'm not going anywhere, Amanda, not unless you ask me to." In the days that followed, Rich became her anchor in a sea of chaos. He respected her need for space, never staying overnight but appearing regularly with groceries, prenatal appointments carefully noted in his calendar, a steadfast presence that demanded nothing in return. When morning sickness hit with brutal intensity during her 8th week, it was Rich who held her hair back, brought ginger tea and saltine crackers, and installed blackout curtains when she developed light sensitivity. When legal papers arrived from Mike's attorneys, divorce proceedings citing infidelity, seeking to void any financial obligations due to paternity uncertainty, It was Rich who connected her with Sarah Chen, a formidable divorce attorney known for protecting vulnerable clients. "He's trying to leave you with nothing," Sarah explained during their first meeting, using public humiliation as leverage to force an unfavorable settlement. "I don't want his money," Amanda insisted, her hand instinctively protective over her growing belly. "I just want this to be over." Sarah's expression softened with rare sympathy. "I understand, but this baby deserves security, and you deserve fair treatment after 10 years of marriage. We'll fight for what's right, not what's vindictive." Autumn deepened into winter. The cottage transformed under Rich's careful attention. Weekends found him repairing loose shingles, installing better insulation, converting the small guest room into a nursery with pale green walls and a hand-built crib he crafted himself. "You don't have to do all this," Amanda protested one Saturday. Watching him assemble a rocking chair while snow fell softly outside, Rich looked up, his expression serious. "I know I don't have to. I want to. For you, for our child, and yes, for myself too." "Why?" The question emerged before Amanda could stop it. The insecurity, Mike's betrayal, had planted blooming into momentary doubt. Rich set down his tools and crossed to where she stood. Taking her hands in his, he held her gaze steadily. "Because every moment with you feels right in a way nothing else ever has," he said simply. "Because watching you fight through this with such dignity humbles me. Because the thought of raising a child with you fills me with purpose I've never known." He paused, thumbs tracing gentle circles on her wrists. "And because I'm in love with you, Amanda. Not just with the idea of you or with the mother of my child, but with you. Complicated history, uncertain future, all of it." The confession, so honest and without expectation, pierced the protective shell Amanda had built around her heart. Since leaving Mike, for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival, a life rebuilt on foundation of genuine connection rather than social expectation or biological imperative. That night, as a winter storm howled, outside, Amanda asked Rich to stay. They lay together in her grandmother's four-poster bed, his body curved protectively around hers, his hand resting on the small swell of her belly, where their child grew stronger each day. "Tell me about the headquarters design," she murmured. As they drifted towards sleep, Rich chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her back. "You want architecture talk now?" "I want to hear your passion," Amanda explained, lacing her fingers with his. "It reminds me that there's creation beyond destruction, beauty after loss." So Rich spoke softly about sustainable design, about buildings that honored both earth and occupants, about spaces that fostered community rather than isolation. Amanda listened to the cadence of his voice, the excitement that animated his descriptions, so different from Mike's cold corporate calculations of profit and prestige. At 16 weeks, Amanda felt the baby move for the first time, a fluttering sensation like butterfly wings against her insides. She called Rich immediately, words tumbling out in excited disbelief. "Can I come over?" he asked, the eagerness in his voice matching hers. An hour later, Rich knelt before Amanda on the cottage sofa, his hand pressed gently against her rounded abdomen, patience and wonder mingling in his expression. When the baby kicked again, more forcefully this time, his eyes widened with awe. "That's our child," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." Amanda covered his hand with hers, the simple domestic joy of the moment nearly overwhelming. After so much turmoil, "Our baby," she echoed. The 20-week anatomy scan brought news that their child was a girl, perfectly formed and developing right on schedule. Rich wept openly in the ultrasound room, overwhelmed by the grainy image of tiny fingers and a steadily beating heart. "She's beautiful," he kept saying, eyes fixed on the screen. She's absolutely beautiful. Later, as they celebrated with dinner, at the cottage, Rich presented Amanda with a gift, a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm in the shape of a half moon. "I thought we could add a charm each year on her birthday," he explained as he fastened it around Amanda's wrist. A story of her life, told in silver. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, not just the present itself, but the implicit promise of a shared future, brought tears to Amanda's eyes. "What did I do to deserve you?" she whispered. Rich lifted her hand to his lips. "You were yourself, that's all. Just beautifully, authentically yourself." Their growing happiness was shadowed only by the ongoing legal battle with Mike, who had launched a vicious campaign to minimize his financial obligations while maximizing Amanda's public humiliation. Each court filing included strategic leaks to business publications, painting Amanda as calculating and unfaithful, carefully excising his own role in the arrangement that had led to her pregnancy. "He's getting desperate," Sarah reassured Amanda after a particularly brutal story appeared in the financial press. "We have documentation of the fertility treatments, witnesses who knew about his condition. If pushed, we can prove he initiated the contact with Rich. I don't want to drag this through the courts," Amanda sighed, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "The stress isn't good for the baby." "Then perhaps it's time we approach this differently," Sarah suggested. "Let me arrange a mediation session. Sometimes face-to-face conversations can achieve what legal filings cannot." The mediation, held in a neutral conference room downtown, marked the first time Amanda had seen Mike since leaving the penthouse months earlier. He entered with calculated precision, his bespoke suit and perfect grooming a stark contrast to her simpler maternity dress. Her changing body a visual reminder of everything that had transpired between them. "You look well," he offered stiffly, as they took seats across from each other. Amanda nodded, one hand resting protectively on her rounded abdomen. "I am well." Mike's eyes flickered to her stomach, something unreadable crossing his features. "And the baby?" "She's healthy," Amanda replied, the automatic "our daughter" dying on her lips. This child had never been theirs, a reality Mike had made abundantly clear through his public disavowal. The mediation proceeded with tense formality, both sides presenting terms for division of assets, ongoing support, finalization of the divorce. Mike remained coldly strategic throughout, his corporate mask firmly in place. It was only when discussing the penthouse, the home they had shared for a decade, that emotion finally cracked through his facade. "You never loved me," he said suddenly, interrupting Sarah's point about equitable distribution. "Not the way you love him." The accusation hung in the air, raw and unexpected amidst the clinical legal negotiations. Amanda met Mike's gaze steadily, seeing for the first time the genuine pain beneath his calculated exterior. "I did love you, Mike," she said quietly, "for many years. But somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other as people. I became a potential mother and nothing more. You became a provider, a problem solver. We lost ourselves in roles instead of growing as partners." Mike's jaw tightened. "And Hampton, what role does he play in your life?" "He sees me," Amanda answered simply. "The whole person, not just the parts that serve a purpose." Something shifted in Mike's expression, not softening exactly, but a subtle recognition of truth he had avoided confronting. Before he could respond, however, Amanda gasped suddenly, her face contorting with pain. "Amanda?" Sarah was immediately at her side. "What's wrong?" "The baby," Amanda managed through gritted teeth. "Something's not right." The next hours passed in a blur of emergency rooms, concerned doctors, monitors tracking fetal heartbeat and maternal vitals. "Preterm labor," the doctors explained, "brought on by stress, potentially dangerous at only 24 weeks gestation." Rich arrived at the hospital in record time, his face ashen with fear as he rushed to Amanda's bedside. "I'm here," he promised, grasping her hand as if it were a lifeline. "I'm right here." Through medication and careful monitoring, the contractions eventually subsided. The crisis passed, but the doctor's warning remained clear. Significant bed rest, minimal stress, vigilant prenatal care to prevent recurrence. What stunned Amanda as she prepared to leave the hospital the following day was the arrangement that awaited her. Mike had silently coordinated with Rich, their mutual concern for her health temporarily overriding their antagonism. A specialized transport service would take her home. A visiting nurse would check on her daily. All medical expenses would be covered without question. Why? Amanda asked when Sarah explained the arrangements. Whatever else he might be, Sarah replied carefully. Mike Topping doesn't want harm to come to you or the baby. This situation may have broken your marriage, but it hasn't completely destroyed his humanity. Back at the cottage, confined to bed except for brief, supervised movement, Amanda found unexpected peace in the enforced stillness. Rich adjusted his work schedule, conducting meetings virtually from her small living room, preparing meals in her grandmother's kitchen, reading architecture journals aloud when sleeplessness plagued her. During one such night, as moonlight spilled through the bedroom window and the baby performed acrobatics beneath Amanda's skin, Rich set aside his book and placed a gentle hand on her stomach. "I never thought I could feel this way," he admitted softly. "This overwhelming mix of terror and joy. The absolute certainty that I would do anything to protect you both." Amanda covered his hand with hers. "Is that what love is? Certainty in the midst of chaos?" "Maybe," Rich smiled, the moonlight catching the angles of his face. "Or maybe it's finding someone worth facing the chaos with." As her pregnancy advanced into the third trimester, Amanda began preparations for the birth, a midwife-assisted delivery at the cottage, with Rich as her support person. The legal battles with Mike had reached tentative settlement, the divorce, proceeding with less public vitriol as both sides tired of the conflict. What none of them anticipated was the envelope that arrived one morning, addressed to Amanda in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a brief note. "Mrs. Topping, I was fired for disloyalty after witnessing your husband's behavior. Perhaps this will help set the record straight. Vanessa Morgan." When Amanda plugged the drive into her laptop, she found audio recordings. Mike's office phone calls, accidentally captured when his cell connected to the office system during their weekend at the lake house. His voice came clearly through the speakers, detailing his plan to have her sleep with Rich, discussing how to approach the arrangement, calculating the benefits of a child with her genetic material. Most damning was a conversation with his lawyer from the day after Amanda had left the penthouse. "Of course I knew about Hampton," Mike's voice declared coldly. "I selected him specifically, arranged the whole thing, but no one else needs to know that part. As far as the public is concerned, she betrayed me, not the other way around. Her reputation is collateral damage I'm willing to accept." Amanda sat frozen, the evidence of Mike's calculated destruction of her life playing in crisp digital clarity. Beside her, Rich's expression hardened with each damning word. "This changes everything," he said when the recordings ended. "This is your way back, Amanda, your vindication." As Amanda stared at the small device containing truth, powerful enough to rewrite the narrative Mike had so carefully constructed, she placed both hands on her rounded abdomen, feeling her daughter's strong kicks beneath her palms. "Not just my vindication," she said quietly, "but our daughter's right to know she wasn't born from manipulation or scandal, but from something genuine and true." What Amanda couldn't know, as she contemplated how best to use this unexpected ammunition, was that the recordings would soon become central to a legal battle that would rock Manhattan's business community. A battle that would force Mike to publicly acknowledge his deception, that would restore Amanda's reputation, and that would ultimately lead to justice neither she nor Rich had dared to hope for. But on that quiet morning in her grandmother's cottage, with Rich's supportive presence beside her and their daughter growing stronger each day within her, Amanda finally understood the truth. Sometimes what appears to be betrayal's sharp edge is actually the necessary cut that severs us from what no longer serves our highest good, making space for something far more precious to take root and grow. Chapter 8. Truth's Whisper. "Play it again," Sarah Chen instructed, her normally composed features tightening with each word from the recording. Amanda watched her attorney's reaction, finding vindication in the controlled fury that crossed Sarah's face as Mike's voice filled the cottage living room. "Her reputation is collateral damage I'm willing to accept. 6 months pregnant now." Amanda sat with her hands protectively cradling her rounded abdomen, the evidence of Mike's calculated betrayal spreading through the room like poison. "This changes our entire approach," Sarah said, stopping the playback. "These recordings prove Mike orchestrated the situation, then deliberately destroyed your reputation to protect his own." Rich, who had been silently pacing by the window, turned to face them. "Can we use this in court? Is it legal evidence?" "Single-party consent applies in New York," Sarah explained. "Vanessa was a party to these conversations through the office phone system. It's admissible." She turned to Amanda, her expression softening. "This is your chance for vindication, Amanda. But pursuing this means more public exposure, more stress during your pregnancy." Amanda closed her eyes briefly, feeling her daughter's movements, strong kicks against her ribs that seemed to urge action rather than retreat. "I'm tired of hiding," she said finally, opening her eyes with newfound resolve. "Not just for me, but for her." She looked down at her belly. "I don't want her growing up believing she was born from scandal and deception. She deserves to know she came from something authentic, even if it wasn't conventional." Sarah nodded, respect evident in her gaze. "Then we'll file amended counterclaims immediately. Defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraudulent misrepresentation." She began gathering her papers with efficient movements. "Mike Topping has significantly underestimated you, Amanda. It's time he learned that mistake comes with consequences." After Sarah left, Rich knelt before Amanda's chair, taking her hands in his. "Are you sure about this? We could still move forward quietly, focus on the baby, on building our life together." Amanda squeezed his fingers gently. "I've been quiet for too long. First during the fertility treatments when I swallowed my doubts to protect Mike's ego. Then when he proposed that arrangement, suppressing my discomfort to give him what he wanted. Even when I fell in love with you, I kept silent about my feelings." She shook her head. "No more silence. Our daughter deserves a mother who stands." In her truth, Rich's eyes filled with emotion. "I love you," he said simply. "Both of you. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The legal response to Amanda's counterclaims was swift and vicious. Mike's attorneys filed motions to suppress the recordings, questioned their authenticity, and doubled down on portraying Amanda as calculating and manipulative. "He's scared," Sarah reassured Amanda during a tense phone call. "These are desperate tactics from someone who knows he's losing control of the narrative." Indeed, as copies of the recordings found their way to select journalists, the public tide began to turn. Articles questioning Mike's version of events appeared in business publications. Former fertility clinic staff came forward confirming Mike's medical condition and the years of treatments. Even Mike's assistant, Vanessa, gave an exclusive interview detailing the toxic work environment that developed as Mike became increasingly obsessed with having a child at any cost. Through it all, Amanda focused on preparing for her daughter's birth. Rich transformed the cottage into a sanctuary, installing better heating, creating a peaceful nursery with walls the color of dawn, building bookshelves to hold the children's stories Amanda had collected over years of teaching. "Read to her," Rich encouraged one evening, placing a book in Amanda's hands as they sat in the nursery's rocking chair. "She should know your voice telling stories." Amanda opened the book, a tale of a bird who discovered her song after losing her nest, and began to read. Rich sat on the floor beside her, one hand resting on her belly, smiling when their daughter kicked at the sound of her mother's voice. These quiet moments sustained Amanda through the building legal storm. Mike's attorneys requested depositions, demanded medical records, threatened to expose every detail of her relationship with Rich. "Let them," Amanda told Sarah during a particularly tense preparation session. "I have nothing to hide." Mike orchestrated this situation, then blamed me when it didn't follow his script. "I won't be ashamed of finding genuine connection where he expected only transaction." The deposition itself proved grueling. 8 hours of Mike's attorneys attempting to twist Amanda's words to paint her as opportunistic and unfaithful. They questioned the paternity of her child, implied she had manipulated Rich, suggested she had always planned to leave Mike once pregnancy was achieved. Through it all, Amanda remained steadfast, her voice never wavering as she recounted the truth. The years of painful fertility treatments, Mike's growing emotional distance, his shocking proposal at the lake house, the genuine feelings that developed between her and Rich. "Did you intend to fall in love with Mr. Hampton?" Mike's lead attorney asked, his tone suggesting the answer was predetermined. Amanda met his gaze directly. "No, I intended to follow my husband's arrangement, believing it might save our marriage. But what Mike failed to understand is that human hearts aren't corporate assets to be leveraged and controlled. When someone sees you, truly sees you, after years of being reduced to your reproductive potential, that connection can't be regulated by contractual terms." Her quiet dignity during the proceedings impressed even opposing counsel. When the deposition ended, Sarah squeezed her hand with rare emotion. "You were magnificent." That evening, exhausted beyond measure, Amanda lay in bed while Rich gently massaged her swollen feet. "One day," she murmured, half asleep, "we'll tell our daughter about all this." Rich looked up, his hands stilling. "What will we say?" "That love finds its way through the most unlikely circumstances," Amanda replied, her eyes drifting closed. "That sometimes you have to lose what you thought you wanted to find what you truly need." At 32 weeks pregnant, Amanda received a call from Sarah that changed everything. "They want to settle," her attorney announced without preamble. "Mike's requesting a private mediation session." Amanda sat heavily on her grandmother's sofa, one hand automatically cradling her belly. "Why now?" "The recordings have been authenticated by 3 independent experts. Vanessa has signed an affidavit confirming their content. Mike's board of directors is expressing concern about the potential damage to Topping Enterprises if this goes to trial." Sarah paused. "He's running out of options, Amanda." The mediation was scheduled for the following week, neutral territory at Sarah's firm's offices. Amanda arrived with Rich and Sarah, her advanced pregnancy now impossible to disguise in even the most forgiving maternity dress. Mike entered alone, his confident stride somewhat diminished since their last encounter. He looked older somehow, the strain of recent months etched into lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Amanda," he acknowledged stiffly, his gaze flickering briefly to her rounded abdomen before darting away. "Mr. Hampton." The mediator, a distinguished former judge with silver hair and penetrating eyes, outlined the process with efficient precision. Mike's attorney presented their settlement offer, financial terms that were considerably more generous than previous proposals, but contingent upon mutual non-disclosure agreements. "Absolutely not," Sarah responded immediately. My client has been publicly vilified, her professional reputation destroyed, her pregnancy turned into tabloid fodder. Financial compensation is warranted, but not at the cost of perpetuating a false narrative Mr. Topping has constructed. Mike's attorney leaned forward. Then what does Mrs. Topping want? All eyes turned to Amanda. In the momentary silence, she felt her daughter kick strongly, as if offering encouragement. The truth, she said simply. Public acknowledgement from Mike that he orchestrated this situation, that he knowingly and deliberately damaged my reputation to protect his own. Mike's face hardened. That's not happening. Then we proceed to trial, Sarah replied calmly, where the recordings will be played in open court, where your former assistant will testify about your instructions to destroy Amanda's credibility, where fertility specialists will confirm your condition and the treatments you pursued for years. The color drained from Mike's face as the full implications of a public trial materialized before him. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but Mike waved him off, his eyes fixed on Amanda. May I speak with my wife, with Amanda, privately, he requested. After conferring with Sarah, Amanda agreed. When they were alone in a small conference room, Mike's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Why are you doing this? He asked, genuine confusion in his voice. You're going to have your baby. You have Hampton. You could take the settlement and move on. Amanda studied the man she had loved for so many years, seeing now the insecurity that had always driven his need for control. Because the truth matters, Mike, not just for me, but for our daughter. She's not mine, Mike said sharply. No, Amanda agreed quietly. She's not, but she exists because of choices you made, choices you then punished me for when they didn't follow your script. Mike looked away, unable to meet her gaze. I didn't expect you to fall in love with him. Neither did I, Amanda admitted. But it happened. And instead of facing that painful reality together, you chose to destroy me publicly. Silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of a decade shared and now irreparably broken. What exactly do you want from me? Mike finally asked, defeat evident in his voice. A public statement acknowledging that you arranged for me to conceive with Rich, that you knew and approved of my relationship with him for that specific purpose. That when rumors began circulating, you chose to blame me entirely to protect your reputation. Amanda's voice remained steady. I want the truth on record, Mike, not hidden behind settlements and NDAs. Mike's jaw tightened. That would destroy everything I've built. No, Amanda corrected gently. It would only destroy the lie you've been living. There's a difference. When they returned to the mediation table, Mike's expression had shifted from defiance to resignation. The discussions continued for hours, terms and conditions debated, language scrutinized. By evening, they had reached an agreement, one that included both financial provisions and, most crucially for Amanda, a public statement from Mike acknowledging his role in the situation. As they prepared to leave, Mike lingered, waiting until Rich stepped away to speak to Amanda one final time. I did love you, he said quietly. In my way. Amanda nodded, recognition rather than reconciliation in her gaze. I know. But love that requires someone to be less than they are isn't really love at all. Mike's eyes dropped to her belly, to the visible evidence of the child he had once desperately wanted and now could not claim. For a moment, something like genuine regret crossed his features. I hope she has your kindness, he said simply before turning to leave. Rich appeared at Amanda's side, his hand finding hers with instinctive certainty. Are you okay? Amanda watched Mike's retreating figure, the man who had been her husband, her dream, her deepest disappointment, and felt the last chains of their shared past finally release. Yes, she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. I really am. As they left the building together, stepping into the gentle spring evening, Amanda felt her daughter move within her, strong, determined, already reaching toward her future. A future that would now be built on truth rather than deception, on love freely given rather than strategically arranged. For the first time since leaving the penthouse months earlier, Amanda felt not just the absence of fear, but the presence of genuine hope, as delicate and persistent as the first whisper of truth that had set her free. Chapter 9: Justice's Embrace. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Eleanor Patterson entered, her robes sweeping behind her with authoritative precision. Amanda sat at the plaintiff's table, her 8-month pregnant form commanding a different kind of attention than the Manhattan power brokers who filled the gallery. Rich sat directly behind her, close enough that she could feel his reassuring presence without turning. Despite the settlement agreement reached in mediation, Mike had failed to issue the promised public statement. Instead, his attorneys filed last-minute motions claiming the recordings were obtained illegally, that Amanda had manipulated the situation, that Rich had pursued her with deliberate intent to damage Mike's marriage. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Superior Court of New York County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Patterson presiding." The final hearing in Baldwin versus Topping had drawn media attention beyond the business press, becoming a society scandal that captivated the city. At stake was not just the division of assets or the finalization of a divorce, but reputations, legacies, and the truth about a child's conception. "Your Honor," Sarah began after the formalities concluded, "we are here because Mr. Topping has failed to comply with the terms of our mediated settlement. Specifically, he has not issued the public statement acknowledging his role in the circumstances that led to my client's pregnancy." Mike's attorney rose immediately. "Your Honor, my client is prepared to comply with the financial terms of the settlement, but new evidence suggests the statement would be based on potentially fraudulent claims. We request—" "Enough," Judge Patterson interrupted, her piercing gaze moving between the attorneys. "I've reviewed the mediated agreement, the subsequent filings, and the evidence submitted by both parties." She turned toward Mike, who sat rigidly at the defense table. "Mr. Topping, this court does not look kindly on parties who negotiate in bad faith." "Your Honor," Mike's attorney tried again, "my client—" "Your client," Judge Patterson cut in sharply, "recorded conversations reveal orchestrated a situation where his wife would conceive a child with another man, then publicly accused her of infidelity when the arrangement became known. These are not disputed facts, Counselor." The gallery erupted in murmurs, silenced quickly by the judge's stern glance. "Mrs. Topping," Judge Patterson addressed Amanda directly, using her married name for legal purposes, "you have asked this court to enforce the settlement agreement, specifically the public acknowledgement of Mr. Topping's role. Is that correct?" Amanda nodded, placing one hand protectively over her belly. "Yes, Your Honor. Not for financial gain or vindictiveness, but so that my daughter won't grow up believing she was conceived in scandal or deception." The simple dignity of her response seemed to resonate with the judge, whose expression softened momentarily. "Mr. Topping," Judge Patterson turned to Mike, "would you like to make a statement to this court before I rule?" Mike rose slowly, his usual commanding presence diminished by the circumstances. For a moment, he looked directly at Amanda, something unreadable passing across his features. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady despite the visible tension in his shoulders, "I agreed to the settlement terms under the understanding that certain aspects would remain confidential. A public statement would irreparably damage my business interests and personal reputation." "Your reputation," Judge Patterson observed dryly, "appears to be built on a carefully constructed narrative that omits significant truths. This court is not concerned with protecting such constructions." Before Mike could respond, Amanda gasped sharply, doubling over at the plaintiff's table. A murmur ran through the courtroom as Sarah immediately moved to her side. "Your Honor," Sarah called, alarm evident in her voice. My client needs medical attention. I believe she's in labor. The courtroom erupted into controlled chaos. Judge Patterson immediately ordered her clerk to call an ambulance. Rich vaulted the barrier separating the gallery from the court floor, kneeling beside Amanda's chair. Breathe. With me, he urged, his voice a calm anchor amidst her pain. Just like we practiced. Amanda gripped his hand with surprising strength, her face contorting with another contraction. It's too early, she managed between labored breaths. She's not due for 3 more weeks. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, efficiently transferring Amanda to a stretcher. As they prepared to move her, Judge Patterson approached, her judicial severity replaced by human concern. This hearing is suspended, she announced, but not concluded. Her gaze shifted pointedly to Mike, who stood frozen at the defense table. We will reconvene when Mrs. Topping's medical situation stabilizes. Thank you, Your Honor, Sarah acknowledged, gathering Amanda's belongings as the paramedics began moving the stretcher. Rich never left Amanda's side, his hand firmly clasped in hers as they navigated the courthouse corridors toward the waiting ambulance. Behind them, reporters called questions, photographers captured the dramatic exit, and curious onlookers whispered speculations. None of it mattered to Amanda, whose world had narrowed to the rhythm of contractions and the pressure building in her lower back. Rich's voice remained her constant, murmuring encouragement and love as Manhattan streaked past the ambulance windows. At the hospital, the medical team moved with urgent efficiency. 36 weeks, elevated blood pressure, signs of preeclampsia. The intake nurse catalogued as they transferred Amanda to a delivery room. The baby, Amanda gasped as monitors were attached and IVs inserted. Is she okay? The obstetrician on call, a woman with kind eyes and confident hands, checked the fetal monitor. Strong heartbeat. She's handling this well, but we need to monitor you both closely. Preeclampsia can be serious. Rich stood at Amanda's bedside, his face pale but determined as he brushed damp hair from her forehead. You're incredible, he told her. So strong. Our daughter is lucky to have you as her mother. Hours passed in a blur of pain, medical interventions, and increasingly urgent discussions among the medical team. Amanda's blood pressure continued rising despite medication, her body swelling visibly as proteins spilled into her bloodstream. We need to perform an emergency C-section, the obstetrician finally announced. Your preeclampsia is progressing rapidly. It's safest for both you and the baby to deliver now. Terror and determination warred within Amanda as they prepared her for surgery. Rich, now dressed in sterile scrubs, held her hand throughout the procedure, his voice steady even, as his eyes betrayed his fear. You're doing great, Amanda, he whispered. Just breathe. I'm right here. Here she comes, the doctor announced minutes later, and a thin cry filled the operating room, indignant and perfect. She's beautiful, Rich whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as the nurses quickly assessed the tiny girl. Amanda, she's absolutely beautiful. Amanda caught only a glimpse of her daughter, a flash of dark hair, impossibly small fingers, before the medical team whisked the baby to the NICU for observation. Rich, go with her, she urged. Don't leave her alone. As Rich followed their daughter, Amanda felt darkness creeping at the edges of her consciousness. The last thing she heard was the urgent voice of the obstetrician. Her pressure's dropping. We need blood now. Amanda awoke to the gentle beeping of monitors and the sensation of someone holding her hand. Opening her eyes required monumental effort, her lids heavy as if weighted with sand. There you are, Rich's voice came softly, his face swimming into focus. Welcome back. The baby, Amanda whispered, her throat raw and dry. Rich's smile was radiant, despite the exhaustion evident in his face. She's perfect. 5 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy lungs, strong heart. They're monitoring her in the NICU, but she's doing remarkably well for being early. What happened? Amanda asked, becoming aware of the IV lines and monitors surrounding her. You had postpartum hemorrhaging after the C-section, Rich explained, his voice catching slightly. They had to transfuse you. It was... You scared me. The C... Naked emotion in his eyes told Amanda how serious the situation had been. She squeezed his hand weakly. I'm still here. Yes, you are, he agreed, bringing her fingers to his lips. And so is our daughter. When can I see her? Amanda asked, attempting to shift her position and wincing at the pain from her incision. Soon, Rich promised. The nurses said they'll bring her when you're a bit more stable. A gentle knock at the door preceded a nurse entering with a clear bassinet. Someone's eager to meet her mama, she announced cheerfully. Rich helped adjust Amanda's position, supporting her as the nurse carefully placed the tiny bundle in her arms. Amanda gazed down at her daughter's face, taking in the delicate features, the rosebud mouth, the impossibly perfect fingers. Hello, Lily, she whispered, the name they had chosen together slipping naturally from her lips. I've been waiting for you. Lily's eyes, dark and alert despite her early arrival, seemed to focus on Amanda's face, tiny brows furrowing in an expression of serious consideration that so resembled Rich that Amanda felt tears well in her eyes. She knows you, Rich said softly, perching carefully on the edge of the bed to encircle both of them in his embrace. She's been listening to your voice for months. The perfect contentment of the moment was interrupted by another knock. Sarah Chen stood in the doorway, her usual professional armor softened by the scene before her. I hope I'm not intruding, she said, uncharacteristic hesitation in her voice. I wanted to check on you and to let you know about the court proceedings. Amanda nodded, reluctant to shift her attention from Lily, but curious about the outcome. What happened after we left? Sarah stepped into the room, her expression shifting to something Amanda couldn't quite interpret. Judge Patterson was formidable. After your emergency exit, she called Mike to the bench for a private conversation. I wasn't privy to what was said, but when they returned to the record, Mike had agreed to make a full public statement acknowledging his role in the arrangement. Just like that? Amanda asked, surprised after months of resistance. Just like that, Sarah confirmed. The statement will be issued tomorrow morning at a press conference. Judge Patterson explicitly ordered that it include his acknowledgement that he orchestrated the situation with Mr. Hampton and then blamed you publicly when it became known. Rich shook his head in disbelief. What changed his mind after all this? Time? Sarah's gaze moved to the tiny infant in Amanda's arms. I can't be certain, but I believe seeing Amanda go into labor in the courtroom, seeing the very real consequences of his actions, might have finally pierced his armor. She paused, something like respect in her expression. Or perhaps Judge Patterson simply made him an offer he couldn't refuse. After Sarah left, promising to return with details of the press conference, Amanda looked down at her daughter's sleeping face. Justice comes in unexpected ways, she murmured. Rich nodded, gently tracing Lily's perfect cheek with one finger. And sometimes what seems like the greatest injustice leads to the most perfect outcome. As evening descended outside the hospital windows, Amanda held her daughter close, marveling at how this tiny being, conceived in such complicated circumstances, had become the catalyst for truth, for freedom, and ultimately for the kind of love she had almost stopped believing existed. Tomorrow would bring Mike's public confession, the formal conclusion of their divorce, the beginning of a new chapter for all of them. But tonight, in the quiet sanctuary of the hospital room, Amanda simply breathed in the scent of her newborn daughter's hair and allowed herself to feel the justice that had finally, unexpectedly, wrapped them all in its transformative embrace. Chapter 10: Sweet Revenge and New Beginnings. The Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom hummed with tension as Manhattan's business elite gathered for what had been billed as an important announcement from topping enterprises. In the back row, nearly unnoticed, Amanda sat with Sarah Chen beside her. 3 months had passed since Lily's birth. 3 months of night feedings, newborn smiles, and healing. At precisely 10 o'clock, Mike Topping strode onto the stage, his confident bearing belied only by the tension around his eyes. I've called this press conference to address the personal situation that has been the subject of speculation over the past year, he began, his amplified voice filling the room. As many of you know, my former wife Amanda Baldwin and I divorced recently after 10 years of marriage. What has not been accurately reported is the nature of the circumstances that led to our separation. The room grew still, journalists poised over notepads and recording devices. For many years, Amanda and I struggled with infertility, Mike continued. Medical tests confirmed that I was the source of our inability to conceive naturally. Murmurs rippled through the audience at this unprecedented admission. After multiple failed treatments, I conceived a plan, Mike said, visibly steeling himself. I identified Richard Hampton, a respected architect working on our corporate headquarters project, as someone with the qualities I believed would complement Amanda's. I deliberately orchestrated opportunities for them to spend time together, with the explicit intention that they would conceive a child that Amanda and I would raise. Gasps erupted around the room. In the front row, board members exchanged alarmed glances. When this arrangement became known within certain circles, I made a decision that I deeply regret. Mike's voice took on a quality of genuine remorse. Rather than acknowledging my role in the situation, I publicly accused Amanda of infidelity, allowing her reputation to be destroyed in order to protect my own. Amanda felt tears prick at her eyes, not from pain, but from the surreal vindication of hearing Mike finally speak the truth. I wish to state clearly, and for the record, Amanda Baldwin did not betray me. I arranged the circumstances that led to her relationship with Richard Hampton, and then I betrayed her by denying my role. When it became public, the destruction of her reputation was entirely my doing. The ballroom erupted into chaos, reporters shouting questions, photographers' flashes creating a strobe effect. Board members sat frozen in shock, while investors slipped from the room, phones pressed to ears as they contacted brokers to sell their shares before news of the scandal fully broke. Outside in the spring sunshine, Amanda took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in months. It's really over. Sarah nodded, satisfaction evident in her smile. Justice served, finally, though I suspect Mike will be dealing with the fallout for quite some time. The business community forgives many sins, but public humiliation isn't one of them. Within days, the consequences of Mike's confession rippled through the business world. Topping Enterprises stock plummeted as shareholders questioned the judgment of a CEO who would orchestrate such a personal scandal. Business partners began distancing themselves, concerned about reputation by association. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss Mike's future with the company. He's lost everything, Rich observed one evening as they watched the business. News report that Mike had been asked to step down temporarily while the board conducted a review. His company, his reputation, all because of one lie, Amanda said quietly, cradling Lily against her chest. He could have simply told the truth from the beginning. Pride is a powerful force, Rich replied, and Mike had built his entire identity around being in control. 1 month later, Rich surprised Amanda with an invitation to dinner at the rooftop restaurant of the newly completed Anderson building. His design recently opened to critical acclaim. Amanda's mother happily agreed to watch Lily for the evening. It's breathtaking, Amanda gasped as they were escorted to a private table overlooking Central Park. The space perfectly balanced elegance with warmth, soaring glass walls offering panoramic views, while honey-toned wood and subtle lighting created intimacy. "You influenced this design more than you know," Rich told her as champagne was poured. "All those conversations we had about spaces that embrace rather than impress." After dinner, Rich suggested they step outside to the observation deck. The spring evening had turned slightly cool, and he wrapped his jacket around her shoulders as they stood at the railing, Manhattan spread before them like a glittering carpet. "I brought you here for a reason," Rich said, his voice carrying a nervous edge Amanda rarely heard. "When I designed this building, I created something special on this rooftop." He led her to a section of the deck partially screened by architectural plantings. There, nestled among the decorative tiles, was a perfect inlay of a mother cradling an infant, surrounded by a pattern that Amanda recognized with a start as the constellations visible the night they had first been together. "Rich," she breathed, fingers tracing the beautiful mosaic. "It's us. The building's owners think it's just a decorative element," Rich explained, his eyes never leaving her face. "But I know it's our beginning." As Amanda stood mesmerized by the unexpected tribute, Rich dropped to one knee before her. From his pocket, he withdrew a ring, not ostentatious diamonds like the one Mike had given her years ago, but a band of warm rose gold set with a single perfect sapphire the color of twilight. "Amanda Baldwin," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "Our story began in the most unconventional way imaginable. What started as an arrangement became the most authentic love I've ever known." Tears filled Amanda's eyes as Rich continued, "I love you, your strength, your compassion, your unwavering courage. I love our daughter, this miraculous gift we created together. I want to build a life with you both, one day at a time, with honesty and trust as our foundation." The ring caught the last golden rays of sunset as he held it toward her. "Will you marry me, Amanda? Not because of circumstances or expectations, but simply because we choose each other every day." "Yes," Amanda whispered, joy expanding in her chest until she could barely breathe. "Yes, Rich. I choose you. I always will." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to gather her in his arms, Amanda felt the final piece of her heart heal. Their kiss, witnessed only by the city spread below them, sealed a promise born not from calculation or compromise, but from love freely given and gratefully received. Later that night, as they returned to the cottage where Lily slept peacefully, in her grandmother's arms, news alerts chimed on both their phones. Breaking, topping Enterprise's board, votes to remove CEO following scandal. Amanda silently switched off her phone, choosing instead to focus on the present, her daughter's perfect sleeping face, the weight of Rich's ring on her finger, the future they would build together from the unexpected ashes of her past. "No regrets?" Rich asked softly. Finding her on the porch where she had stepped out to breathe in the night air, Amanda turned to him, her expression serene. "How could I regret anything that led me here? To you, to Lily, to myself?" She glanced down at her ring, the sapphire capturing starlight. "Mike lost everything because he couldn't bear the truth. But in losing what I thought was everything, I found what actually matters." Rich gathered her close, their silhouettes merging into one as they stood bathed in moonlight. Behind them, the cottage glowed with warmth and promise. Not a temporary shelter in the storm, but the foundation of a new beginning neither could have imagined when their paths first crossed. "To truth," Rich murmured against her hair. "To love," Amanda added, turning her face up to his. And as their lips met in a kiss that tasted of future and forgiveness, Amanda knew with absolute certainty that their unconventional beginning had led to the most authentic love story of all. One written not in grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but in honest hearts finally finding their way home.